Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Crimes, Killers, Cults,
And interviews this time.
and Interviews. Yes. I'm
We're doing
Bill, and
something new, and I just remembered it. So
yeah, congratulations.
thanks.
Um, I'm Bill, and with me, as always, is Kevin, the History Goon, host of the world famous, loved by some, adored by some,
Listened to by a few.
listened to by a few podcast, History Goon. And also joining us tonight is Kent McGowen. Kent McGowen was imprisoned for what was accused of as a murder of a suspect, and he's here to tell us about it. There is a book that was written about his case called "Reasonable Doubts: How Rumor and Innuendo Convicted Deputy Kent McGowen of Murder" by Jerry Langton. And Kent's here to talk about it. We want you to listen, get to know Kent, and we also want you to read the book, obviously, because it's really good. So let's get started. History Goon, you got something?
I do. Reasonable Doubts is the compelling story of Texas deputy Kent McGowen, who had a suspect pull a gun on him, then shot her in self-defense. But this is... I can't read. But as the media and others spread rumors about him having a sexual relationship with the suspect, that he was and that he was a crazed killer, he was sent to prison. Reasonable Doubts follows Kent's story from cop to media sensation to suspect and then to prisoner. It's a detailed and revealing look at how American justice can be manipulated and abused. Ain't that the truth? It also looks inside Texas prisons, their inhumane conditions, and the culture they germinate.
As makes me want to go, makes me want to read it.
Yeah, I'm actually going to get a copy pulled up here because that
It'll make you want to read the book and not go to
Yes.
prison. Sure.
Yeah. Well, I already don't want to go to prison, and I also want to read the book. So say hi, Ken. Introduce yourself.
All right. I appreciate y'all having me on. My name is Ken McGowen. I live in the Houston area, and this whole fiasco started in 1992. I was working for the Harris County Sheriff's Office in Houston, and I was assigned. I went out on patrol on April 3rd of '92. I went to at that time I was at northwest part of Harris County, in a very large area and very low manpower. I previously worked for Houston PD, and the county was decades behind the city when it came to manpower, tactics, weapons, gear, patrol cars, and it was a shocker. It was a culture shock, going from that to the other one. And in the course of things, we had throughout the spring and early summer, we had a rash of automatic weapons, drive-bys, shootouts, which is in that area where I patrolled. That wasn't it was an upper echelon type of place. We had capital murders, robberies, stuff like that. But just these automatic weapons, of course, raised a lot of eyebrows.
Yeah, when you say automatic weapons, you're talking about like M16s and Uzis.
Full auto machine guns, yes, sir. Yeah.
Right.
The stuff
drive-by shootings
to own as American citizens. Just
yeah. But they were drive-by shootings at teen parties, if you will. Shots fired in the house, from the house, at the house. Vehicles getting shot up, cars shot up, and I made a disturbance call with a bunch of teenagers, if you will, older teenagers. And I was talking to these two or three just, young guys, and they said, "Hey, man, you know what's going on about these machine guns out here?" Of course, I heard about it. I was working night shift. I worked 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And I said, "Yeah," and they said, "Man, we know who's involved in this." Of course, that got my attention, right? And they said, "Yeah, it's a guy named Keith Scurry, drives a red Beretta." And he said, "He's the one dealing these guns." And I said, "Where are they getting these guns?" And it fell hand in hand with these rash of burglaries we were having. That these real gangbangers, if you would, from Houston came up recruiting these young, yuppie wannabe gangbangers. Recall this was in 1992. This happened. And so these little wealthy kids were somewhat thug criminals, a small clique of them. They're hitting up these burglarizing these houses and taking whatever they wanted. But the the real gang members out of Houston who recruited them, they wanted the weapons, mainly semi-automatic AR-15s, Mini-14s, what have you. And they were converting the real gang members were converting them to full automatic, putting them back on the streets. And that's what was showing up. And these group of burglars, they were also selling, stealing credit cards, also the handguns, anything that was not a semi-automatic, they were selling themselves. Well, after about 2 weeks after this call, where I ran into these teenagers, gave them this intel, pulled over a guy named Mike Schaefer, who wound up being my confidential informant. At the time, he was 19, homeless, basically a homeless kid from Central Texas. And he left Central Texas and was living with his brother for a while in the Houston area. He had this ratty, I don't remember what kind of car it was. It was some little, 15-year-old station wagon. But I stopped him. He rolled through a stop sign in front of me. I pulled this guy over, and it was him, and who was Keith Skur, the target of the in-route investigation. He gave me a fake name at that time. I was in the passenger, had a girlfriend in the back. Anyway, no tickets written. Said, hey, don't be an idiot. Quit driving like this. Excuse me. So a couple weeks later, I stopped the Michael Schaefer again on traffic stop, and he started talking. He goes, hey man, can you help me out? I was like, what? Excuse me, a little bit of cough. And he told me he knew who was involved in the burglary ring and the running weapons. Of course, my suspicion was up is, why is this kid telling me this, Because a lot of times, I've worked narcotics and organized crime and whatnot previously.
Hold on just a second.
Yeah.
But I forgot to do something that I said that I was going to do. We're talking about from the case on. We're not talking about anything that happened prior to it. We're not talking about anything that happened in the past.
Right.
That's not what we're doing here. Because none of it. I don't care if there's a good report. I don't care if there's a bad report, because you know what, whether it was a good past or a bad past or anything like that, that has absolutely zero to do with the events that happened that day.
Yeah.
So I just want to clarify that, because I don't want blah 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 blah, because I have listened, and like right off the bat, how things were skewed, and I haven't read the book that's going to be in question. I don't even want to say the name of that book, but not your book, the other book. But
the tabloid trash.
Yeah, I don't even want to say the name of that, but I would imagine that some of the podcasts that you can find out that were recorded, several years ago, were basically just vomiting what was in that book. And one of the things that was in that book, because I listened to a couple of those podcasts, one of them was like, when you let that guy off, it was like, oh, I didn't have my ticket book on me. I'm guessing that came from the book, but the way you just explained it right then and there, it's just like, you let him off. And you know what? Cops do that every single day. Yeah. So, it's there's nothing to see here. And and I'm glad I wanted to point that out before we really got going, because I know the difference. I know the difference between that. That was something that was probably just blown up in that book. Just to make people go, oh, he wasn't prepared. So,
and, not sure how familiar you are with podcasters, but not all of us do a lot of really good research. Some of us just go with one source and go, oh, this has to be the truth.
Well, I know, like that, the traffic stop, which this was what leads into this whole situation, is this Mike Schaefer. But I think in the tabloid book, if you will, when I read that, I was like, how I got him out. I was hitting up on his 17-year-old girlfriend and had my gun out. None of that happened, man. If that happened, and they said I wrote him tickets. Well, if I'd written citations, there would have been a record.
There would have been a record of it, yeah.
There was none. Yeah, it never happened. And then, then when I stopped him the last time, and he said, hey, I know he's involved in these burglaries. He said, I can get you some guns. So I took to my lieutenant. He was a good dude. And he said, yeah, run with him. And so Michael Schaefer, the informant, called me back a couple weeks later, and they just secured some automatic weapons in the house, but we were not going in the house because I was a sheriff. We had no SWAT, nothing. We were just out there, a handful of us. So my lieutenant and I said, hey, just get the guns out. So he calls me a couple of days later. They burglarized the house. They had a stolen gun. So I set up the buy bust on the deal, and I was working plain clothes that night. I was in a wrecker, and my informant goes, I see the exchange of money. the marked money we had. My informant hands it to the guy, Jason Aguilar, whose mother I wind up shooting 48 hours later. He hands a stolen pistol. I do the buy bus. We take them all down. And there was 3 suspects. One was the Key Skura guy, and who they've hid from us all these years. But he lied to us that time about who he was. But what got this going, man? There were 2 teenage girls in another car that were with them, and they were all crying away. We don't even know these guys. We just met them, just teen hangout or whatever. So I admonished them about hanging out with turds, basically, and told them to, burn off. Well, they go to a restaurant, and they get the woman I wind up shooting because her son was the Jason Aguilar is the one who had, broken into the house and had the stolen gun. Now, I had no idea who this kid was. He wasn't even the target of the investigation. Skura was. That was part of her theory that I was setting him up to get to his mom for whatever crazy reason. But, then Susan White, the female I wound up shooting 48 hours later, she pulls up at the scene, and she gets out a Lincoln Town car, her and this guy, Ray Valent. She was married at this point, and her husband had left her and already had and he was 56. I was 27. Susan White was 43. Her husband had already knocked up their 17-year-old illegal alien girlfriend and had a baby with her and had moved out. And then the suspect, the guy she's with, Ray Valentine, he was such a shady character. They never put him on the grand jury, nothing, because of this, because of his background. But he looked like something out of a Joe Pesci movie in the 80s. Big old guy, jet black, thinning hair, combed back. He had like a black silk suit on, the red shirt, the big collar on the outside, and the gold Italian love horn in the middle. But I see him getting out, and they start hollering at other deputies, calling. She was calling them McGowen, And I didn't hear all this at the time because I'm sitting right next to a patrol car with her son in the back seat, and the information to tow his Mustang, which is full of bullet holes from gunfights and stolen credit cards and purses and whatnot. And Susan White, the suspect, I never say her name. I was suspect. The suspect went to 4 other deputies. And at this point, I was 27 when this happened, man. I was 5'11", 185, wider mustache. Didn't look like I do now. But she went up to Tommy Welch, was 64 years old, 6'4", good 300 pounds. Chris Gush, tall, skinny, redheaded guy. None of those deputies looked at all like me. She's calling them McGowan. So clearly she did not know me 48 hours prior to the shooting, right?
Yeah.
And then, and I was there with another deputy. She kept right next to me. She started hollering him, calling. He goes, "That's McGowan." So I stood up, man, and I remember looking at her walking towards Deputy Genovese, my partner, who wanted to commit suicide over this. I see her walking toward us, and then I said, "Wow, here comes somebody's pissed off parents," So I told her she's raising hell when I talked to her son. This is an effing setup, and he would never do something like this, even though he'd been, he tried to burn down the neighbor's house. He had a stolen .45 automatic. He pointed at a bus driver going to school one day. They terrorized this area for 10 years prior to this.
I was going to say the bullet holes in his car would say otherwise.
Yeah, actually, I did not know this until this night. My lieutenant, great guy, Jay Coons, Marine, by the book. He's a PhD college professor now, good guy. But he told me he'd been to 4 shootouts involved with that kid. He told me that night, he goes, "I know who this little turd is." He said he's been in 4 gunfights, The end of his nose was missing where it had been bitten off in a fight, picking a fight with somebody. He was a little scrawny little turd, yeah. But so I told the suspect, I said, "Hey, you need to get your ass out of here. You're going to go to jail for interfering, right?" So her mobster boyfriend dude grabs her, brings her back to his town car, and she bails out a few minutes later with the first mobile phones, big bricks with the black rubber antenna sticking out. Yeah, she comes running out there screaming and hollering, saying, "Hey, I got Captain Harper on the phone," which was C.J. Harper, who used to be the captain of that division. He was one of the guys who'd been, for 10 years, he'd been banging this woman, and he was married too. Well, she has Captain Harper on the phone. This is a Saturday night, Sunday morning, like 1:30 Sunday morning, and she had his home phone number. She could call him, while his wife was there with him. And she comes running up to me and goes, she's clearly high or drugs and or alcohol. I mean, she was blasted at that point. And she has Captain Harper on the phone. I said, "He's not my chain of command anymore. He's got we had beepers back then, of course. I said, "He has my beeper number. He can page me, man. I'm not talking to him." So the mobster grabs her, throws in the car, and they burn off. On her way out, she leans out, points right at me, and she said, "I'm going to get you, you son of a bitch." I'll never forget that. She did. She destroyed my family, me, and everywhere, socially, professionally, financially, and otherwise. But anyway, I'll try to be as concise and direct at this as I can. And if y'all have questions, just wave at me or whatever.
Well, I mean, the setup is important. So, I mean, as far as, especially when it comes to the warrant and the orders as to how to serve said warrant.
Yeah. That's what we're getting to.
Yeah.
My sergeant. But so that night she comes to the station. We take him to the substation. I was sitting with my lieutenant. She calls, a couple of times on the phone. He kept, making, funny faces at me. And I said, well, I'm sitting there doing the report. There's just the two of us in there. And I said, what the hell was that about? He said, that was that nutty ass woman from the scene. She was telling him that I was out there. And this is at a nightclub parking lot. So there were record drivers, 6, 8 deputies. I mean, tons of people, witnesses, that I was out on that scene, asked her if she was divorced yet, and that if she had sexy legs and all this, which in her psychiatric background, that was her go-to. And for her whole life, she'd been in and out of mental institutions, voluntarily, involuntarily. She escaped out of one in particular, and she caught a cab, and then they immediately catch her the police. That was her go-to, man. She said
had she made accusations against other men to get out of trouble?
That's where we're going. Yeah.
Okay.
When she escaped from one institution in particular, the police catch her. It's a few blocks down. And she said the female nurse had raped her, and that's why she fled. And then she said that the cab driver here tried to rape me too. That was her thing. And her whole life, she was a mental case. In and out of, drug addict, alcoholic. She's married to a police chief in her younger years, some little podunk town in Louisiana. She tried to murder him. That's how she fled to Houston. She tried to kill other people. And then you look her up, like her obituary, and it said that she was a Navy officer, a nurse, a Navy officer. Negative. She made it through basic training in the Navy, and then they were shipping her to be a dental enlisted. They're about to, right after her basic training, they're shipping her somewhere to get or flying her somewhere to get to be a dental hygienist. Well, she gets caught with a bunch of Quaaludes, so the Navy kicks her out. She was never a Navy officer.
Yep.
And then it said that then her obituary, and I think in that tabloid trash book, that she was a nurse. Well, she actually did get her little nurse practitioner. I mean, what is that, LVN or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that lasted 2 weeks until she gets arrested for filling out her own, the DEA form, writing her own scripts. Yeah. So that didn't last long.
Smart.
Yeah. But it was just constant history.
Doing that.
Constant, but that was her go-to. That this guy raped me, or their boss at her mortgage company, when she went crazy there and started accusing him, he's like, I never even met this woman. So she pulled a stunt there, and they're just paying her like $1,200 to stay away from the office.
Reminds me of a Dexter episode where he's going after this woman cop who
yep.
And she's like, oh, you're just gonna rape me. And he's like, what's this with you and rape? Nobody's raping anybody.
Yeah, it's not happening. It's not happening. And I don't, and there's to touch on that real quickly is they, I don't want to disparage the decedent.
Oh,
but
no.
I would have absolutely no. I told my lawyers, you need to put my wife on the stand. And I was like married for 7 years, divorced for 7 years, and remarried. We've been together since first day of 10th grade, 1980. And just that's the kind of female I would date. And when all this was going on at this time, I was divorced, and I had a smoking hot girlfriend. None of them looked anything like the decedent. She was. I wouldn't give her the time of day. I mean, that's just, she's not her son was a holy terror criminal. She's a drug addict, alcoholic. I'm not disparaging. That's just facts. And just the physicalities, there would be absolutely no attraction. But there was, let's see. So at the arrest scene, then she came down to the station, the night of the arrest, raising hell. Lieutenant Coons, Gush, and Deputy Welch went out there and confronted her and said, hey, you need to get out of here and go to jail. So she leaves. And so we booked the guys in. I burn off like 5:30 in the morning to leave. And then 4 o'clock the afternoon, my beeper's going off. This would be Sunday afternoon. My beeper's going off with a 911. And I'd give my CIs like a code like 52 or whatever, So I'm like, what's this idiot now? So I called him, man. I said, what's the problem? Well, the suspect had, you couldn't make this up, man. The suspect, he got burned as an informant. Sometime during the situation, got burned as an informant. So the suspect was going through, back then they used to have long distance phone bills.
Right.
And I didn't know this for years later, but my informant had lived there, and he was at Jason Aguilar, her son. Her son was 16 and the informant was 19. He was just this homeless pothead, burglar, idiot guy. But it didn't come out till later, years later, in a federal civil trial, which we won, that my informant was sleeping with this woman, and she was 40. She was 43. Yeah, 43. And he was 19 and her son's best buddy, you know. And this came out federal trial, and he was like, yeah, sorry, But they, But anyway, that's how the threat started. Is the suspect had found where my informant had called his aunt in Killeen, Texas, out Central Texas, and then his aunt called her sister in Austin, which is Michael Schaefer's mom, and that's how the threats got filtered to me for the felony charge. And many elements, but one in particular was never brought up in trial, totally would have exonerated me. I never talked to the aunt in Killeen. I never spoke with her. Everybody knows that. And the DA's office illegally withheld her from us for 18, 19 years until my writ lawyer's investigator found her, And she said, well, I gave a statement the day after the shooting, which was taken by John Denholm, the guy who set me up with, who we'll get to, drove to Killeen to get this, and they settled that for nearly 20 years, I think. And I'd have never gone to trial. If she had gone to grand jury, I'd never been indicted. This never happened. But they illegally held her. But when I called the DA, I talked to the informant.
So there was some sort of a plan in the well, you were in their crosshairs, so to speak, even before all this happened.
Well, not me particularly, but at this time in '92, the shooting dropped on August 25th of '92. The elections are coming up, and we had a very big handlebar mustache, came from very wealthy, the district attorney, Johnny B. Holmes. And he was good.
And there was also beef between the police department and the DA.
Yeah, the sheriff. The sheriff, they hate each other. And they were always saying each other's corrupt. Elections, they're trying to get their buddies into positions and whatnot. I just fell into this. It just happened to drop, If I'd been at Houston, this happened, nothing. I mean, there'd been no bill, have a good day, go back to work. But the county was insane. It was unmanaged, unsupervised. There was no training. I hired on to train these guys, and I got out of training because they're not teaching these guys how to do anything. But anyway, I talked to the DA, Jean Sparling Hughes. She got off at midnight, right? I went to work early that night about getting the warrant. I said, hey, this is what we have. This is the witnesses, da-da-da. And she said, okay, I need you to talk. You need to call the mother in Austin, right? So I made arrangements. I had to send Austin PD to get her and get the message. And she called me. And I said, hey, what did the suspect exactly say? She told me, informants in Houston don't live long in Houston. Don't you watch TV? Informants in Houston die, blah, 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 Clearly a threat, And I told her, and she's denied it until she's dead now. She died a few years ago. But she denied all the way through. We never could understand why she didn't just say, that she knew that he was an informant. But she said, and I asked the same question you always ask in a situation like this you're investigating. I said, do you think that Susan White has the ability to cause serious bodily injury or death to your son or have somebody do it? She said, yes. She goes, I've talked to her crazy. That bitch. She goes, I've talked to her a number of times. She goes, that bitch is crazy, man. And I said, I knew nothing about Susan White at this point. So I called the DA. Yeah, we'll accept charges. I went down there. Quite controversy about this next step is the DA's got off, they rotated out at midnight. And the DA intakes where you go to file charges. There's always a DA there. Yeah, I'll accept charges. Here's a warrant, whatever. I've done that numerous times, getting warrants like that. So I went down, talked to Jim Mount, the DA. He said, all right, he issued the warrant, but he wouldn't call a judge to sign it. They have judges on call 24/7. It's like 4:30 in the morning, 4:30. And he said, I'm not going to wake a judge up, Judge Ted Poe, hanging Judge Ted. He said Ted Poe comes on at 6. He gets here at 6 early, just have him sign it. And I said, well, and this is one of the major steps that proves I had no intent to kill that woman, man. I left it there, right, the warrant, because I got off at 6. And I'm not going to sit around for 2 hours. So I called my day. Yeah, go ahead.
If you were going to kill her, you wouldn't have. Again, I'm not a cop. I've never had any experience with that. I would think if you were going to do that, you wouldn't leave a trail of evidence that you were trying to find said person.
It it would have done. I'm not saying this happens, but I'm sure it has somewhere. Pull somebody over, in a traffic stop, whack them, throw a gun in there. Hey, man, the guy pulled a gun on me. We had no cameras back then. That's
right.
not this. I'd have to be a mastermind and the luckiest guy ever to get this done. You're not going to jail. But that's just one of the major steps. Is that when I left the warrant there and I bumped my day shift deputy, my relief that came on at 6, Tommy Moore, and I said, hey, just go get this warrant on the suspect, 3407 Amber Fortune. I'll take care of it. So I got home. Of course, I was asleep at like 10 o'clock in the morning. My beeper goes off. I looked at it. It was a DA's office. So I called, and it was Deputy Moore. He said, hey, I'm up here with this prosecutor handling this, and she's pissed. And I said, what? And he said, yeah. And so she gets on the phone. She's hollering at me, man. Hey, why didn't you serve this yourself? Why didn't you serve this warrant last night? And I mean, it wasn't like a capital murder, thing. And then I said, well, it's 2 hours difference. You should have done this. And speaking of that, prosecutor called me after the shooting. They indicted that woman that I shot after she was dead. The grand jury did. There was enough evidence for their own grand jury to indict her, But back on trail here, so I told deputy they wouldn't sign it because somebody at the DA's office they used to have whiteout back then, liquid, whatever we call it. They'd whited out my name as the affiant, which they actually did back then, is insane and, archaic as it sounds. So I said, just leave it there. I'll come in early tonight. No big deal, man. So I went in early that night. I went and got the warrant. And the DA there was a great guy, man. There was a young HPD officer and I were there getting separate warrants. And we were shucking and jiving this DA. He taught in the academy. We all knew him or whatever. And so he tells us to go to Judge Shipley's house, his older judge. We go there. We're shucking and jiving with him. I remember he's talking about his wife who recently died and gun collection or whatever. So go back to head back to the station. I bumped my sergeant, Dave Ruggiero. This guy needs to be addressed. This guy was the biggest coward I'd ever seen. He had no business being a policeman, let alone a supervisor. He was our night shift sergeant. Absolute coward. I don't want to go to stories I've seen that. This guy let somebody die. I watched this guy let somebody die because he wouldn't make a decision. But he was married, but his girlfriend owned a nightclub. Whenever someone he'd always call me to run it. I remember we had a capital murder. I was at my family's ranch 2 hours away. Called, hey, you need to get your ass down there. He always called me, but he hated me. We all hated him. But he was from he's from Ohio, and he had his brash Ohio and his accent. But he despised all of us. We all hated that guy. And his cowardice was just beyond anything I'd seen in law enforcement. But anyway, he calls me back to the substation. He's sitting in the comfort and safety of his office, and Deputy Todd Morong and Deputy Mike Malloy, the two deputies that ran the warrant with me, like I said, I didn't hardly know these guys. We ate at Denny's a couple of times before this. We were like hanging out, never saw them off duty, nothing. So they would have no reason to lie all these years and cover for me, especially all the grief it's caused them. But I walk in there, and David Ruggiero, the sergeant, yanks the warrant out of my hand. He goes, well, is it okay if I cuss on this? I'm directly quoting.
Oh, shit, yeah.
Fucking hey, that's cool. No, but he said, I'll never forget this. I testified as my first trial. But he yanks the warrant out of my hand. And he said, he was a little skinny. I despise that dude, man. But he yanks the warrant out of my hand. He looks at it. And he said, take Morong and Malloy and run the fucking warrant. I said, hey, look, man, you need to go, dude. I said, there's burglary, drugs, automatic weapons, gang activity. You're supervisor. You need to go up there. I ain't going up there. And when I was at
Houston, like a good idea to have somebody there, like out of like a higher rank, because they're going to need to be there anyway. I would imagine it. Oh, it also makes you look good.
It gets even more egregious with this character.
Well, you would think that, especially since this woman is tied to
since they had a history with her. See, I just got out from patrol.
This is the weapons that this is the suspect. Mm-hmm. Am I correct that this is the suspect of where all these weapons are coming from, right?
And this sergeant knew that. And my lieutenant, we found out just a year or two ago. But my sergeant knew this. He'd had a history with these people. That sergeant, and I'll say bad about my lieutenant, but I don't know, he should have said something. Not one of my supervisors said, hey, we have history with these automatic weapons. The dude who lives there is in gun battles. I mean, this woman's a nut. Nobody told us that, None of them, and they all knew this. If I'd have been, this all came out later, of course. If I'd have been a sergeant lieutenant, I'd have said, hey, man, we got to get a posse out there, And I think Jerry brought up in a recent interview that there was like 0.5 deputies per 100,000 people where we were working. When Houston had 50, there was like 7 of us out there with almost 1 million people. It was insane. It was utterly insane out there. It went anywhere from ranches to intense, highly compacted metropolitan, neighborhoods, bars, restaurants. It was an upper area, but it was growing rapidly. But anyway, when I told Sergeant Rogero, I said, "Hey man, you need to go out there as a supervisor. I go out there." And he goes, and exact words. If you read the book that Jerry Langton wrote, the first sentence in the book is, "What are you, some kind of fucking pussy?" Because that's exactly what Rogero. That's exactly what Rogero told me. He looked at me and goes, "What are you, some kind of fucking pussy? Take Ron Roy and run the warrant." And I said, "Dude, at the city, I policed more in 3 days than they did out in a year with that guy. He did nothing, And so I told him, I said, "Look, man, you need to get more deputies. I don't care if you pull them in from another district, man. We're going on there with this is a gun deal. Once again, what are you, some kind of fucking pussy? Take my money and run the fucking warrant." I said, "Man, all right." Damn. So I walk out, I'm wrong, I'm a lawyer. What the hell? And I had personal issues with that guy with some other issues. And he was an idiot. So I've run, I don't know how many warrants at that point, but I actually called this suspect because I figured being in this neighborhood, she had money for a lawyer, whatever. I knew none of this about her. So we had the recording. I called twice from the station before we rolled on it, man. And she didn't answer the phone. They used to have those phone mates, the answer machines. I have no idea how old you guys are, but we used to have like these little recordings.
You're not too much older than I am.
Yeah, okay. Well, I had phone mates and beepers, But so we had the tape of the 2 hang-ups. I called, she answered. I called again, she didn't answer. I was going to tell her. I said, "Hey," because I don't know about now, but back then you could post those called a no arrest bond. Get your lawyer, go to a bondsman, and post your bond, and then that way you don't go sit in jail for 2 or 3 days. I was going to give her. What if she would have answered the phone? What if Sergeant Rogero would have gone? Why would I get this sergeant who I despised? He despised me and everybody, but particularly me for various reasons. And then why to take him with me to commit a murder? Why would I tell him you need 6 or 8 more guys that I don't know to go with me to commit a murder? Why would I call her and tell her to turn herself in? I kept throwing my own roadblocks into my murder scheme, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
So, yeah, I'll self-sabotage.
You're really trying to thwart yourself from committing a murder.
Yeah, maybe subconsciously I was trying to stop myself. I don't know, man.
You should have been a cop. You would have been really good at it.
Yeah. But then they, so I briefed Ron Malloy, so we go to the house, this sort of shooting drop, man. So, you never park in front of a house. So I park a house or 2 down, do a little stealthy thing, right? This is like a little after 1 o'clock in the morning on Monday night into Tuesday morning. And so Deputy Morong and I go to the front door. I send Deputy Malloy, and these are seasoned deputies. These weren't just some yahoos. But he sends them out. I tell Malloy, go to the back and secure the rear entry, so there won't be an escape or whatever, somebody trying to flee. And so Morong and I, and this is that thing, I forget what, Breonna Taylor, which one was the no-knock warrant issue?
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, I would never, out of every warrant I've ever served, is somebody cut out it saying connecting? Oh, okay. Out of all the warrants I served, I've never knocked on a door. And this is why. If you knock on a door, that gives a suspect time to grab a weapon, flush the drugs, hide, set up an ambush. Basically what happened to me, in a moments later, But we figured in this neighborhood, whatever. So we're knocked on the door. We're out there for 15 minutes, And she'd called 911 34 nights in a row. She did this all the time, and the deputies would respond out there. She'd open the door with nothing on, a thong, a nightie. And she had this issue with police, and she was tapping, which came out several deputies out there and our captain, But they, and in the tabloid trash book, the writer, the grasping sensationalistic writer of the book, she talked to some friends of the suspect, who none of those friends we put on the stand because she had 2. That was it, and they're all just crazy ass, old alcoholic women. But even the writer of that book said. She would use the word Matt, M-A-T-T, Matt Smith. And I'll get to that in a second, but she even puts about, Susan White was, telling her friends that she was dating this baby-faced deputy named Matt. And I saw Matt about a year ago. He still looks 12. And said that, that they'd broken up. She was having problems with him. And the book even says Matt, like short for Matthew, M-A-T-T. My last name is McGowen. And then the writer wrote Matt, and then she put in parentheses, or was it Mac? I've
Oh
never
my
gone by
God.
Mac.
Wow.
Nobody at family's gone by Mac. That's how grasping it was.
Ugh.
But yeah, we'll get to Matt Smith here in a minute. But we'll get to that after the shooting. I'll tell you the 3 times I saw that woman in my entire life.
So can I jump in real quick?
Absolutely.
Because I want to ask you a question, because I'm a gun enthusiast. So
I understand. Yes.
you are going out somewhere where these people potentially have a house full of automatic weapons.
Potentially, yes.
Okay. What were you carrying for gear? Just for shits and kicks, because I have a fairly good idea, I think, of what you would have had. But
yeah, actually, I just bought a Benelli M1 Super 90 entry gun when they came out, and I had that in my rack. I started to get it, and I put it back in. Thank goodness, But I had a Glock Model 20, 10 millimeter Glock.
Okay, so that would have been like
had the New York trigger.
Probably like a Generation 2 Glock.
I think it was like first came out. You had the 10 millimeters. I ordered it direct because if you had letterhead from your department, you could order it directly from Smith or Smith and Wesson or from Glock. Got quite a discount. Yeah.
So my thought there was, because I know that some departments at that point in time were still like running around with revolvers. I did a pretty well. I'm not gonna bullshit anybody. I did a very in-depth episode on the North Hollywood bank shootout.
Yeah, very familiar.
The amount of those deputies that responded to that with 357 revolvers was staggering.
Yeah.
And these guys are out there with fully automatic converted like Chinese AKs, and one of them at one point had they had the SKS. One of them at one point had the Heckler and Koch G3 that he had converted full auto, which is a 308, which is horrific. But so I'm actually kind of surprised that you would have had a Glock at that point. But if it's coming out of your, I guess with it being like a sheriff's department where you guys would have a little bit more they were just freedom to do whatever like that, right?
Yeah, when I was with Houston PD, I carried a Smith & Wesson 657, a 41 Magnum, and that's why I went with the 10, because ballistically they're pretty much the same. It was just like carrying a high-capacity, fast-shooting 41, and then everybody's pretty much going to the automatics then. But, I'm a military veteran too. I shot my entire life, and there was some issues about, we'll get to that here in a second, the exact shooting. But I knew what I was doing. I was an instructor, as far as tactics, weapons, and we were basically our own SWAT team. We had no SWAT, we had no vice, we had none of that stuff out there. It was insane, But anyway, back to the I'm sorry, go ahead.
Did you guys have like any kind of like ballistic vest, or are they more like the stab vest that?
No, we had ballistic. Yeah, we had ballistic vests, but it was they weighed. I don't remember how much. On a hot Texas, man, it was a killer wearing them. Big old heavy vests, not like like we're on the outside, just underneath their uniform shirts. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The only time in 10 years being a policeman, the only time I didn't wear a vest is a guy tried to shoot me in the back doing a riot in Houston. A biker guy. I was on top of his wife. She was shooting at somebody. I was taking her down, and I didn't know he was part of that crowd. Yeah. But the one night I didn't wear it, I almost got it. Almost got smoked. Some old ass HPD dayhead guy, especially when I was working special operations. Never seen the guy before, and he was standing next to me, and he saw that gun, and bam. And that dude saved my life. I never knew that guy's name. He saved my life, absolutely. But anyway, back on this crazy story. Deputy Laura's the background. I'm at the front, and we're there for 15 minutes. She calls 911, and I don't know if y'all heard the tape. It disturbed me, man. She called night. She was on. I remember Soma, Milltown. She was on a number of drugs at the time, of course, which she always was. But she calls 911. She starts wanting to talk to my lieutenant, which all these years, I never said anything about it until about a year ago. When my FBI guy went to talk to him, and then Jerry wrote the book, interviewed Lieutenant Coons. And that guy really went to bat for me, man. I've read his grand jury testimony, seen him at trial, and he's an expert witness and all this stuff now, PhD professor. But anyway, the suspect calls 911, and she said, "I want to talk to Lieutenant Coons." You barely understand her, And the front doors, like these double, like French cut glass double doors that opened out, oddly enough. And so after she starts screaming, and Deputy Todd Morong saying, first because she kept calling 911, burglaries, robbery, broken house, just to get the deputies out there, and she'd open up wearing nothing and whatnot. So finally Morong said, "Hey, look, we have some property reported stolen, I might open this door." She goes, "I want to see some ID." So Morong says, "Look, open the door. We'll show you our IDs. We're just going to try to snatch her out the door, right?" She wouldn't open the door. Then she starts hollering, "Get McGowen." And then he said, "Look, it's Deputy Morong, Deputy McGowen, the sheriff's office. We have a warrant. You need to open the door." Then she starts hollering, "Get Deputy McGowen off my property. He's a cop who thinks he owns the world." And she said, "He's been sexually harassing me." That was her go-to at all times, right? And so we hear this. What the hell does she even know who I am, Which we found out just about a year ago how she knew who it was. But anyway, here's another thing. She's on the phone with 911. She's on the phone with the sheriff's department, and they're telling her Lieutenant Coons didn't, you need to call the station. So I'm talking to both these dispatchers. So I know this is being recorded by 911 and by the sheriff. So there's another predicament I would have found myself in on the murder plot, right? So now it's being recorded, which is good. And so I told Morong, I said, "I'm going to step back here on the driveway and call that idiot sergeant." So Morong's telling him, "Hey, McGowan's gone now. She still won't open the door." "I don't care. You were men. You shouldn't be looking in my windows." She's telling dispatcher, "I don't know. They say they're cops. Say they're detectives. We're in uniform." Just blabbing, psychotic babblings. So I cover my ass to this idiot sergeant. I step back on the side, driveway on the side of the house. I bumped this sergeant it's called a tactical channel. It was like car to car. And when you weren't tying up all the dispatch, it was just like, if there's officers, working together on something, it only goes out like a mile or whatnot. But I bumped that idiot sergeant on the radio, and he was 413 was his numbers. I was 4176. I bumped him. I said, "Hey, 4176, 413, take 8. So he rolled over to the tactical channel. And I said, "Hey, man, we're out here, she didn't open the door, and I had we could just kick in the door. You don't have to knock, And because this nice neighborhood and who I was described as she was, whatever, I never saw this coming, And so I asked that sergeant, I said, "Hey, man, is it clear to 4th Century?" And he said, "It's a fucking felony warrant. Kick the fucking door." He was very professional, I said, "Man." And I said, "All right, man." I said, "You need to get your ass out here, Ruggiero." I said, "This thing's spinning out of control. You need to get your ass out here." "Nah, fuck it. You take care of it." Yeah, all right.
I have a desk to sit at.
Yeah, that's what I say. I described that on a podcast the other day. I said, "You know what? He was sitting in the safety and comfort of his office, which he never left,
making sure his
sitting in
chair
the air
doesn't run
conditioning.
off.
Yeah, watching Scooby-Doo videos, whatever the hell he did." No, he'd call me to, like, I told his girlfriend had that club. He'd always call me and that club was like 15 miles from my beat because he knew I knew what I was doing out there, But but anyway, so I return to the front door and I tell Morong, I said, "Hey, man, that idiot said to kick the door." He goes, "All right." So Morong, I was a pretty good sized dude back then, man, and Morong was bigger than me. He's Boston, big old Marine, good dude, very good dude. But Morong kicked the door once. Bam, it didn't even budge. So I said, "Todd," and I said, "Hey, man, there's no sense in kicking down a $10,000 door. Plus the way it was, double doors opening out, it was been pretty difficult anyway." And I said, "Hey, just maintain security up here. I'm gonna go around back and I'll make entry with Malloy in the rear." He goes, "All right, I got the front." So I'll walk around the back and I tell Malloy what's going on. And so he bangs on the door like 5 minutes in the back. Well, Morong up front sees a suspect with something in her hand. He can see through the glass, her headed toward us, where we were had been the southwest corner of the residence. So he sees her coming, and so he hauls ass around the back of the house. Well, Morong's on the way. Malloy leans back and he kicks the door once, nothing happens. And this is a big controversy on the timing. But Malloy he kicks the door, and Malloy's a big dude. He's like 6'2", good 210. And Malloy kicks the door, and the second time the alarm goes off in the back. So he looks at me and I said, "Hey, mule kick it," and it'll go down. So he turned around, wham, mule kick, and the whole door frame fell in, right? So Malloy turns to go in, and I told you about how the suspect, her husband, had left her for the teenager we had a kid with. She had destroyed the house and it was trashed. We go in a little utility room, and Malloy trips and falls, which, for my training and his common sense, it was dark. It was like 1:30 in the morning at this time. We had our flashlights running. But when he tripped and fell, of course, I went over him to protect him, because he's on the ground scrambling in the dark to get up. He'd make an easy target, what they call, if you're a gun guy, you know what a fatal funnel is, right in the door.
Well, that's what happened to
And
me
so I
a
went
few
over
minutes
to
ago.
protect Malloy. So Malloy gets up. He's right behind me. And I don't know Morong's behind us at this point. And right dead ahead of me was like a little breakfast nook, if you will, kitchen, formal dining room. Well, I looked to the right, and it was a very large living room with a stairwell banister going up near it. Well, I see the suspect. This was a huge issue in all those tabloid trash books and media and whatever. I see the suspect not going in, but crossing the door, going from right to left, and I see something in the right hand. I'm thinking it's the phone, because situations I've been in like that. I mean, you're in a crack house, you're in a chase, dealing with some crazy drops, right? So we had our weapons out, absolutely, it's a felony warrant. Well, she's running right to left, she was coming from where the master suite was. That would be the bathroom area and the dressing room. That's when she was grabbing the gun. She was getting the gun at that point.
Right.
And she hangs up right when the alarm goes off. She hangs up to go grab the gun. And then we found in the top of the detectives in the top of the closet, the 4473, she had illegally bought the gun. And her own son testified she brought the gun to, quote, blow Ron's fucking head off. That was her husband's name, Ron White. She was going to murder her husband with a gun. Of course, she lied on what ATF, what 4473 is, right? The federal questionnaire to buy a weapon. She lied. She was a convicted felon, drug addict, alcohol, mental institution. No. She illegally bought the gun. But that's when she was running from right to left. And so I see the suspect, right? And even one of those prosecutors in some of these documentaries saying, he beelined right to the bedroom. Why did they search the rest of the house? Well, I mean, if I see a suspect, for lack of a better term, a target of a warrant, that's why you're there, is to arrest that suspect. Why would we go search the rest of the house
when you know where the suspect is?
Yeah, and then she could be trying to crawl out the window, grab a gun, which she did. No telling, right? So I beeline there, and it's like our flashlights are on, and I was, hey, sheriff's office, felony warrant, come over and see your hands. And she never says a word, And so I go in. I'm the first one to the door. Lloyd's right. He's right on my ass. And Morong, I still know he's right behind us. He's literally leaning against me. I lean in the door. The door to the bedroom had been broken down before. Obviously, it was trashed. But the door opened to, if you're looking at the door, it opened from my right to my left. And behind the door, there was a small, like a nightstand. It had a TV on top of it. Was the cable converter boxes they used to have back in the day, which plays into the story. But anyway, I lean in there, I had my flashlight high and my Glock in my right hand, and I see her standing there, with a gun in her hand. She had her right elbow and her right hip. The gun was in her right hand, which is controversial. But she never says a word. And you do literally tunnel vision, because the only way someone's going to kill you is with their hands. I don't care what their head, their feet, whatever they're doing. I literally zoomed in on the gun. Sorry, it was indexed. Her finger wasn't on the trigger at this point. And I yelled, I said, drop the gun, drop the gun. I mean, it was pointed at me, but her finger wasn't on the trigger. I said, drop the gun, drop the gun. And after I said the second time, she pulls the gun up, points right in my face. I see her put her finger on the trigger. And I tell her a third time, drop the gun, I'm going to shoot you. And I see her put her finger, start to squeeze. So I fired. I had a New York, what a New York trigger is. I had a custom built Glock. And I fired 3 rounds as hard and fast as I could. Because what flashed in my head at that very, I remember like a Polaroid picture of my Glock with the slide back as a still picture. They don't have Polaroids anymore. You know what I mean? A still picture.
Yeah.
The slide back and 2 spent casings in there in the muzzle blast. I remember that and seeing her motion, out of focus motion. But when I fired, the first round hit, which proved her right hand was pointing at me, hit the cuff of the garment she was wearing, and then struck her center mass. It pretty much hit everything it could have possibly hit. So it killed her pretty much instantly. Well, round 2, we were trained to fire 3-round bursts. If you remember the revolvers, they used to train 2-round bursts. Yep. You had 6 rounds. You knew what time to pump and dump, right? But they started training 3-round bursts with all the high capacity, automatics coming out. But round 2 followed round 1, struck her in the middle of the right arm, went through the right arm, and hit the chest. It was a non-fatal wound. In round 3, as I was backing up firing, I hit it went through the corner of the cable converter box. Everybody agrees that bullet was deformed when it struck the suspect. And she literally fell into it, and it hit her here, through the nose, across the cheek like that. And then she landed face down, but on her left side, with her right knee on top of her right knee and on top of her right hand with a gun under it, right? And so it was just, when it fired, you said you're a weapons guy. You got the muzzle blast. It's dark. You got the muzzle blast, the recoil, the smoke. Your ears are ringing. The alarm's going off. Everybody's hollering. To this day, to hear a house alarm go off, it just it triggers the word they use. I just, oh man, But remember, alarm going off. But your night vision's gone, and that's the first time I saw Morong. He runs in underneath me after I fired, right? And then he was the first one to the suspect. And to this day, I don't remember. I had an SL35 Screamlight, the big one. I don't know what I did with it, but I remember I had my handcuffs out. You always handcuff a suspect. I didn't know she'd been struck because she's like on her left side, but face down. Deputy Morong, he's kind of a hardcore guy. He's a Marine, and he says in this testimony we have of his, he said, you know what? He goes, I don't know why I can't wait till the last second. He goes, I'd have shot her dead 3 times in the chest when I first saw the gun, which I'd have been justified in doing. That's another point. Is that what if I went in there to these deputies I didn't know and the suspect didn't have a gun? There goes my murder plot again, right?
Yep.
Well, then what am I going to do? Multiple steps. And also realize the suspect escalated every step of this. She could have not made a threat. She could have not come down there. She could have, answered the phone when I called. She could have opened the door and just surrendered. She could have come to the station. Every step she escalated, And, Morong would have gone in first. Sergeant would have been there, or Malloy wouldn't have tripped. She would have. I was just a dude, and I got caught in this political stuff when this happened.
It's like you don't know if somebody else had gone in there before you, if she would have hesitated and and she would have just had it up immediately and shot somebody, shot one of your guys.
Yeah,
it's that, like, I do watch a lot of body cam stuff, and it's incredible how quick people can move their hands without you realizing it.
Oh, yes.
But the camera, like, your eyes don't pick it up, but the cameras do. And it's just that split second that you lose track of somebody's hands, and it's up, and
yeah,
that's scary. That's got to be horrifying.
That pissed me off. I'll wait to that in a second. But Bill, did you have a question, Bill, or a comment?
Well, I was just saying, it's just like the amount of time. I mean, part of what their thing is, when they were coming against you or whatever, is saying that you planted the gun there. You would have only had like a half a second I was telling Kevin this earlier, yesterday. It's like for you to plant the gun. It's like you would have had to A, know that she had a gun, B, locate it in the room, and then C, plant it after you shot her in order to plant it. And
also not leave fingerprints on it.
Yeah, not leave fingerprints on it.
That was an issue with the fingerprints, yeah.
And we're only talking about maybe 3 seconds at most.
Yeah, Morong, when what you said when I started talking about it pissing me off. And this is another thing. Out, shots fired, she goes down. Morong runs underneath me. And he's the first one to her, I mean, there was even allegations that I had broken into the house earlier that night while she was there with her kid and stole the gun and somehow sequestered it on myself. And then, while Todd was, I don't know, looking somewhere else, I threw it under her hand, But right after the shots were fired, it just threw me into a term. Hang on. Sorry, get overwhelmed at times on specific parts of this. But it was, I remember, and they made a big issue about this in both trials. I knew Malloy was right on my shoulder. He goes, get it out, And I looked at Malloy, and I said, man, my exact words. I said, you fucking heard me. I told her to drop the gun. Well, at trial, they made it look like this. Hey, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Hey, you got that right. You heard me say right. You got it right. You heard me say. It wasn't like that at all, man. It pissed me off in a split second. Because when I saw her that gun, I literally had seconds, very few seconds to make a decision. you know?
Right.
And at that point, it's stuck in my face. We're the proverbial Mexican standoff. It's going to be one of us is going. It's not going to be me. That's the way it was out there. And we went home, you know? Well, what flashed in my head that split second was I afraid she's going to shoot me, take me out. And then, because we all had kids and, married and whatever, And it's my split second shot in my head, and she's going to take me out. And she's going to overrun me and gun down Ron and Malloy, And I remember during the grand jury, this is a split second, but not to get in on that nonsense. But I remember this old white guy at the grand jury sit on the end. Because whenever an officer gets involved, injures or kills somebody, it's just standard to go to a grand jury. And I went in there, and this old guy, the DA who set me up, he says, the grand jurors have a question for Deputy McGowan. I'm sitting there in uniform and whatnot. And this old guy stared at me. I was there for 4 hours and 45 minutes. It usually takes about 3 to 6 hours to clear a shooting. It was 6 weeks as a grand jury because I did nothing wrong. Started bringing in all these people that had nothing to do with it. But anyway, that old man, he looks at me and he goes, yeah, I got a question. He said, why do you fall back and call SWAT? I said, we were the SWAT team, man. This is the sheriff's department, man. We didn't have SWAT. What are you talking about? We didn't have tactical units, nothing. Then he goes, why do you shoot the gun out of her hand? I said, why don't you quit watching stupid movies?
Right?
I said, hey, this is reality, man. And I said, she's pointing the gun right at me. If I'd have shot, if she wasn't going to shoot, she could have flinched and shot me. She could have I could have hit the weapon and went off, I said, she could have hit Maron Malloy. I said, you don't shoot. We don't shoot that. Yeah, we're trained to send our mass for immediate incapacitation in a situation in which it's life or death is what it was, right then and there.
The other one I always loved was, why don't you shoot him in the legs? Well, first of all, if you'd taken an anatomy course, there's a lot of bleedy shit in your legs. And second of all, a gun is not usually in somebody's legs.
Yeah.
The
only it's going to be is in the shooting it out of their hand, except for some crazy extraordinary circumstance.
Yeah.
I saw I just reminded me of this funny meme that I saw at one point. It was like basically talking about a courtroom, and it was this attorney questioning this coroner, and he says, are you sure that the person was dead? And the coroner says yes, and it was like, well, how can you be sure that he was dead? He says, well, because his brain was sitting in a dish on my desk. And he says, well, is it possible that he still could have been alive? And then the coroner says, yeah, he could have gone to college and gotten a degree and become a lawyer.
Yeah, there you go. Stands the cranium, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, after the shots are fired, I look at Malloy. It was just in a rage. I wasn't in a panic. I wasn't scared. I just my reaction it was to be pissed. I said, "You fucking heard me." I told her, "Man, hold her." Well, this is all just a matter of seconds. Morong runs in, and Morong jumps on top of the suspect. She fell on a waterbed, and so we don't know if she struck. Right? Don't know if I did my flashlight. Had my Glock out, handcuffs in left hand. You always handcuff the suspect. I said, I didn't know she'd been hit. Well, Todd gets on top of her, and he rolls over and looks at the wound to the face, and he assumed that was a fatal wound. And he said, he goes, I think she's DOA. And so they back out. I stand there at the doorway to the bedroom, and I immediately get on the radio. I was Unit 4176. I said, I'll never forget this. I said, 4176, shots fired, suspects down, all deputies are okay, roll supervisor, EMS, and the package. The package is internal affairs, homicide, being DA's office and whatnot. So anyway, they all show up, man, and they went upstairs, and the son, Jason Aguilar, the burglar, drug dealer, crazy guy, arsonist, whatever. He was supposed to be no bonded in jail. We can't figure out why he was there. But Morong and Loy, I stay at the front. I stay at the door to the bedroom, securing the scene. They go upstairs, and he's on 911. All high on weed. Hey, man, there's shots in my house, dude. They go and jam him up. They take him out. And that little bastard, they bring him down. I remember he looks at me and smirks, And then in those tabloid documents, they said that we were all laughing and high-fiving. And when he came by, that I was what did he say? Something like, I was grinning at him. None of that happened.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they tend to forget that police are humans and they have emotions, and you don't necessarily want to fucking shoot somebody.
Yeah. That's a big issue. People, even these days, man, they don't think they don't think law enforcement officers are humans. There's a bunch of asshole robots out there, fucking over people. That's what they think. But when you get off work, man, you have wife, kids, you have mom and dad, and brother, sister, nieces, nephews, in-laws. Just like everybody else. You have Christmas. Well, usually working Christmas, but you know what I mean.
And I mean, again, like I said before, I've watched a ton of like body camera stuff, and the reaction that people have when they shoot somebody, like listening to somebody cry because they just killed somebody. Like, it's a person. They're, it's not like we've sent like fucking Terminators out after people.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, they bring that little dude, Jason Aguilar. He started all this. They bring him. He goes by me. He looked at me and he smirked at me, and I was like, that was an odd response. They put him in the down there. They call patrol car shops because it's like your own shop, and you leave the roll call. You're on your own doing that's your business. They took him out, put him in their shop, and then Ruggiero, he decided to relieve himself of the air conditioner and the comfort and safety and security of his office and actually make the scene, which is maybe 5 minutes out. So Ruggiero, he shows up. Some other units got there first. Ruggiero showed up, and he comes up to me and grabs me, and he said, "Hey, go get my shop. Don't talk to anybody." So he walks over there, and I wonder, I sit in the front seat, and the other deputies they called, because we all had unions. You have an attorney on call 24/7. Calls already made to get the union, Clint Greenwood, rolling. And so that sergeant, man, he gives me a legal pad. He goes, "You got a pen?" Well, yeah. He goes, "Hey, you need to write down everything that happened." I said, "Man, have you lost your mind?" I stowed up on the dashboard. Started hollering about, "I'm not writing anything, man. My lawyer's here. That's what they're for. That's their job, Plus, I didn't trust this dude, man, at all, at all. And so anyway, everybody gets there. They do the walkthrough, and it was a joke, man. And there were people we had in the pictures, like at trial, trying to figure out. There were neighbors that lived out there. They were inside the house when the paramedics are working on her, walking around through blood, kicking on, bullets, playing with stuff, whatever. Yeah. Yeah. We're like, who are these people wearing these blue jeans? There's a guy across the street. Yeah. But then the paramedics, it was on the county. They were volunteer guys, so they come in and drag her off the bed and bring the suspect in the living room. And they're trying to work on her. I was outside. I remember when I was outside, a female deputy came up to me, and I didn't know her. I never seen her before. And she goes, "Hey," I work in another division. We're just checking by on this. And she said, "Hey, I was in a shooting 2 weeks ago, man." And she goes, "Gave me her card." She said, "Hey, if you ever need to talk, just holler at me. It'll be all right. It'll be all right." She goes, "You want a Coke?" And I said, "Yeah." So she went by to the little stop and go or whatever we have out there, got drinks. But hearing everybody, the media, we're laughing. We're all out there, grab ass and laughing, high five. None of that happened. Absolutely none of that, man. I want to talk to anybody. My lawyer got there. I used to be a shift steward for the union at Houston. I know you don't talk to anybody. So anyway, internal affairs, homicide gets there, and the DA's office gets there. And it's Don Smith. He was the chief of back then they used to call it the public integrity unit. They'd investigate, among other things, police shootings. Don Smith and Ed Porter, one of his assistant DAs. And then Steve Clappert, the guy who set me up. He's a retired HPD homicide guy who I just recently found out he only worked in the DA's office for 3 days at this point. So he's trying to make a name for himself. But they got out. They always recorded walkthroughs. They said that, in my 30 years of doing this, I've never recorded a walkthrough with a police officer. They do it every time, And I didn't know these guys. I remember I seen Don Smith. He taught, I guess, civil rights in the academy. Taught some class with us. That was it. We did a walkthrough, and I'm standing there with Clint Greenwood, my attorney, who winds up getting assassinated on April 3rd, 2017, by some crazy lunatic. Yeah, he was the first one on an assassin's list. Tragic. Everybody loved him, man. Great lawyer, great police officer. But I remember doing the walkthrough, and I described, hey, this is where you went in. So-and-so was here, whatever. And then I'm standing next to Clint, and back then they had like 3 foot by 2 foot stereo speakers people had for their, record players, whatever. There's one right by the bedroom door, and there's a legal pad on there. And Clint, it's on my right, and Clint's on my left, and he's looking at it, and he nudged me and said, "Hey, don't be obvious, but read that letter, right?" And I looked down, and this letter disappeared until about a year ago. And this was 34 years ago. We recovered it. But I looked down at that letter, it was written to the sheriff, some nonsense about, trigger happy, you're abusive, they're beating kids, all this kind of crap. And she had on there one particular. It was clearly written about me. This was clearly written the 48 hours from the time of the arrest to the time of the shooting. Because when she put deputy, she literally drew a line. She didn't even know my name to put in there. Drew a line, And then, of course, that disappeared and recently recovered it. But on the bed where the shooting, ended up, there was a record slip that I had filled out to tow her son's Mustang, little bullet holes in it. And her handwriting, she wrote on the back there, Deputy J.K. McGowen, unit number 4176. Why would she even call the record company to get my name for it? And she knew who I was, unit 4176, And then, so we jump ahead in the story. A bunch of stuff happened that they said it didn't happen. And the morning of the shooting, we're at the station doing the paperwork, whatever. Homicide guy was there. Man, I've got his transcript from my FBI guy. Interviewed him. That's a shocker. What happened with him? What they did to him about this? But anyway, the morning of the shooting, the captain that we had then, Captain Smith, he called Jason Aguilar in there to tell him his mom had been killed. And his first response is, "Well, can I get back in the house?" And they're like, "No, there's somebody can come get you." And so they call one of the crazy. One of the suspects' only two friends, this crazy lady. Well, before he calls, the son, Jason Aguilar, calls my informant, Michael Schaefer, and asked him 7 hours, I guess, after his mom gets shot, "Hey, do you have a spare key to the house so I can get in and get my mom's jewelry and sell it?" So he didn't have his big issues with his mom being whacked. Yeah. So, yeah, but he was a turd. So jump ahead, man. My family had death threats. We had death threats. We're living at our lake house, hours so north of Houston.
So
the suspect was originally from Louisiana.
I got a question. What was the at what point, like, what the first when you knew there was trouble afoot? What was the first thing that came out in the media? And when was that?
Oh, about 5 hours after the shooting. The husband had some connections to some organized crime. They never did figure out there was something going on there. And that morning on the news, it came out that we were there drinking on duty and basically making homemade porn with this female and drinking on duty. And it led to whatever we got into, some kind of fight.
Who told them that?
An argument. The guys who were the husband's lawyers, these big lawyers, they saw money because they saw the county, the city, and my family had. My dad was in the oil and gas business. He has his own oil business. He was doing well. They see money in this. So this was on the news, and we're in there finished up doing the statements. Rolling, what the hell? Of course, my beeper is going off. All my police buddies from different agencies, whatever. What are you watching? What 911? I call. Are you watching this? What? Yeah. So that was out before we even got home.
Damn.
And so anyway, I go home that day. It was my day off. I had Tuesdays and Wednesdays off. I got off at like 10:30 that morning, whatever. And then I go back to work Wednesday night, man. Morong and Malloy, they still had like 2 hours on that shift. They sent them back on the street because they'd already given their statement, And then that was a big issue. I did a podcast about 3 years ago with this girl named Ashley, and her in New York City. Her podcast is Fuck That. But she did a 5.5 month investigation, and she's some kind of mental health thing, I guess. And it got brought up by another podcast the other day, and Jerry touched on this. I never had a day off over this. Not people, how many, and never. And then about a week after the shooting, man, I was just pissed. I got tired of people asking me about it, and it was just all kind of crazy stuff going on. And I called that asshole sergeant. I had to be at work at 10. It was like 8:30, 9 o'clock. I said, "Hey, man, I want to burn a sick day." And I remember this guy, man, Brazzero. He said, "What are you, a fucking pussy, man?" He said, "You need to come to work. Everybody's going to think you're a pussy."
Yeah, man, I just fucking shot and killed somebody. Maybe I need to take a day off. Like,
all this investigations going on and all this stuff, man.
Nowadays, isn't there like administrative leave that they'd put somebody on for like a couple of weeks until they clear everything through?
Nobody said anything to me about it. And that's on patrol there. But the Houston PD, they have their own psychological service, a whole division. Well, I owned a nightclub with a major at the sheriff's department and some other ranking guys. We're at a meeting one night about something like 2 weeks after this. And the major said, well, he goes, Ken, how'd your psychological deal go? Which one? He's just been down to because they didn't even have their own. They contracted out with somebody. The sheriff did. And they shoot people down here all the time, especially back then. It was at least one a week or something. It was crazy. But he said, I said, I never went. And he goes, man, here's the address. You get your ass there at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. It's all right. So I go down there and I did the MMPI, that 2 psychological tests, like 600 or 800 questions, just random. Yeah, I did that. Talked to the psychologist or psychiatrist, whatever he was, and I just saw his name the other day somewhere. But anyway, I did the MMPI. It takes about 4 hours. And I went and talked to him for about 2 hours, and he said, hey, how you doing? I said, he goes, I'll tell you what. He goes, you flatlined, through your MMPI, nothing going on. And he said, I'm going to sign up to go back to work. And I said, well, thanks. I'm going to be there in 5 hours. He said, what do you mean? I said, I had a day off. That dude was, man, he was shocked. You got to
yeah.
I said, no, man, they wouldn't give me. I even called in for a sick day and they wouldn't let me off. Like Morong and Malloy, they went back to patrol for another couple hours after the shooting.
That's crazy.
And those guys they were witnesses, and they're witnessing the shooting, man. Nothing, and still to this day, nothing.
Wow.
But anyway, jump ahead through the story, and who set me up is I went to the grand jury. Shooting was August 25th of 92. I think October 28th, I went to the grand jury. I think that on October 31st, that major I was telling you about, Charles Wiedemeyer, he's a good guy, man. He calls me at home. It's my day off. He calls me at home and he said, hey, man, he said, can you come to internal affairs? I said, yeah. And he's kind of whispering. And he said, hey, can you hear me? And I said, yes, sir. He goes, bring your lawyer. So I went, all right.
Oh, shit.
So I called my union lawyer, Bob Thomas, retired HPD sergeant. And he said, hey, look, they're going to probably give you, 1, 2, 3 days, just 3 days off. They call it fishing days. We'll get your money back. Don't worry, We never saw this coming. Never. And so, they said there was some stuff going on, wiping the fingerprints off the suspect's gun and all kind of nonsense with that never happened. But anyway, I go down internal. I go pick up Bob. I was in my truck. Bob Thomas, a lawyer. And he said, hey, we get there, just don't get pissed off. They're going to probably give you a couple of days off for whatever, just appease somebody. It's all right. So we go down there and walk into internal affairs, and the major was sitting in the internal affairs captain's chair, right, behind his desk. And internal affairs captain's on this side, the homicide captain's over here. And then there was a big, heavy-set older detective. Never seen before since. Never spoke to this guy before. And Bob Thomas, our lawyer's standing behind me. The major told me in the seat. He goes, man, he said, look, there's no easy way I can tell you this. I said, what? And he said, they handed down a sealed indictment today. And my lawyer, Bob, said, for what? He said, murder. Yeah, I literally.
You all right?
I literally felt like somebody slammed me in the chest with a baseball bat. Nobody in my family's ever had a ticket. My brother, 31-year police officer, veterans. I never had a ticket, nothing in my entire life. And now going from being a decorated, officer, 10 years to an accused, right for nothing, And I remember that detective, and Bob Thomas, man, he loses it. You're not fucking handcuffing him. You're not handcuffing him, And they said, look, the media doesn't know yet. We're going to get him down. Because we're at a different building where they had the detective bureaus. About a 15-minute drive to the main Hooskow. But that old detective, I have no idea who he was. He said, let me tell you something, Deputy McGowen. He said, I've been doing this 46 years. 42 years I've been in homicide and internal affairs. I've seen thousands of shootings, hundreds of police shootings. He said, this is the cleanest fucking shooting I've ever seen, man. He said, you had a valid warrant signed by a judge. You had in her hand the gun that the suspect bought illegally, and her own son gave statement she was going to murder her husband with it. You have 2 deputies with you don't even know. You try to get your sergeant to go. And he said, you know what scares the shit out of me? He said, this could be, back then there's 8,500, different agencies, 8,500 in Harris County, different officers. He said, this scares the shit out of me and the other 8,500 officers in this county. He said, that could have any one of us be sitting there.
Yeah.
And which one of us is it going to be next?
Roger that, man. And then they take me, they don't handcuff me anyway. We all kind of slide out in cool cars and go down to the main sheriff's department where the jail is. I never stepped foot in jail. I went into the ID division captain's office. He's an old guy. I'd never seen him before since either. I'm just sitting there. I don't know what the hell's going on. They started to wait, right? So I'm sitting in there. That old captain looks at me and goes, let me tell you something, man. He goes, you and I have made history. And I said, yeah, what's that? And he said, getting your first ones to get indicted on line of duty shooting in the state of Texas. And I said, well, how'd it work out for you? And he goes, well, I've been here 35 years. He said, don't worry, man, it'll work out. And actually, I'm the first law enforcement officer in this country, which probably means on the planet, that got indicted, convicted, and sent to prison on line of duty shooting. I was the first one ever
Wow.
on a murder charge. There's been someone like manslaughter nonsense, but yeah, for just a flat ass out first degree murder, yeah. And so I went home, man, and then my lawyers went up to their office. Clint Greenwood and his partner Brian Beacon, great guys, man. They both were, commissioned police officers. They worked at the DA's office. And actually, Clint was a civil rights division prosecutor. The division went after me. But I remember a few weeks into it, I was going to their office for meetings. Big, tall, white guy walks out. Big, tall guy, well over almost 7 foot. Or he goes, "Hey, you know who that is?" I don't have a clue. A basketball player, man. And he said, "No, that's an investigator for the insurance company. They had a life insurance, I think $2.5 million life insurance policy on the suspect. And their investigation said she was in the commission of a felony, which resulted in her death. So they didn't pay out. But in this meantime, man, my house shot up, brake lines cut, dead crawfish. She's from Louisiana, crawfish in the mailbox. It's craziness, man. But I wound up going to trial in February of '94. And at the trial, what voir dire is when they picked the jury. They had an all-white jury, all males, except for one female. And she lied. We don't find this out till this is 34 years ago. We find out about 2 years ago that she not only was a lawyer, she worked for the guy prosecuting me, Ed Porter, And so, yeah. But it was after the first trial. Okay. Yeah, we find all that out. But during the trial, Steve Clapper, the investigator, he got and committed aggravated perjury, not to drag out telling the story, but absolutely committed insane perjury. Because they went back after the morning of the shooting, the husband, who had actually filed a restraining order against the suspect to be served that day. But the day she gets shot, he and his girlfriend and their baby move into the house. So they're moving furniture around and all kind of stuff. And let me back up. The night of the shooting, down here they call him CSU, Crime Scene Unit, not a CSI. Deputy Reinhardt. He had never been trained in crime scene. He was like the commissary guy working in the jail. That's the sheriff part back then. If your buddy was a lieutenant or whatever, hey, work homicide? Okay, you're a homicide guy. That's just the way he did it. But this ID guy winds up. He goes out. He takes no photographs. He takes no video. Doesn't make any recordings. No measurements. He left the bullet that hit the face, and then through the cable converter box in the face. It went through and it hit the headboard on the bed in the bed, and then it punched through the sheetrock and it fell in between the brick and the sheetrock. He left that there, and so the husband he moves in. They're moving furniture around. 5 days later, John Denholm, the major character, just set me up. John Denholm, homicide lieutenant, Steve Clappert, the DA investigator, his buddy, and the two prosecutors, they go to this house 5 days later. And let me back up. The morning of the shooting, when the crime scene guy totally screwed up, left bullets there, the glasses, evidence, the converter box. Well, the day shift CSU supervisor gets a CSU deputy experience when they go back to the house. People are already in the house, completely disturbed scene, totally unsecured. Well, they drained that water bed and moved it to recover the bullet in the wall and cut out a 2 foot by 2 foot section of the wall. And I've been moved. 5 days later, the guys who set me up, the team, they go in there and they do all these strings. They had lasers back then. They were doing like strings. They're trying to say that I stood right on top of the suspect and shot her, right? And which is insane because during the crime scene aspect of it, I was like toward the foot of the bed at the doorway, and she was like at the head of the bed, if you will. There was, and the crime scene guy never did trace metal to see what hand or gun, which hand she held the weapon in, which became an issue. He didn't fingerprint nothing. He didn't do any gunshot residue, anything. Well, they came back, and there was no gunshot residue on the foot of the bed. And she was, I don't know how long the bed is, 6 foot or 7 foot. There was no gunshot residue on her. So I was at least 11 feet from her and at least 4 feet from the foot of the bed when I fired the rounds, right? Well, the DA convinced the first jury that I shot her in the face in front of deputies that I didn't know. I shot her in the face. Then she was rolling, trying to grab the phone. I shot her in the arm, which if she was reaching for a phone, there's no way a bullet could have gone through the arm and hit behind her like this. And then he said I walked up on her. She was rolling, begging for mercy, and did a coup de grace through the 10 ring, and that's how I killed her. But there was no stifling, no gunshot residue. anyone on her or her clothing, the bed, nothing.
I would think if you stood directly over top of someone and shot them in the chest, you would probably have blood on you.
True.
I'm assuming you didn't, because
Negative.
10 to 12 feet, however far it was that you shot her from, that's a sizable difference to get blowback from.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm no investigator. I probably could have figured that out pretty quickly.
Right.
Oh yeah. But they, the left hand, right. During my first trial, I testified in my first trial. I got found not guilty. And the judge I had at the time, he told us in front of the jury, he said, there was no way I'm sending you to prison if the law let me keep you out. He knew I was in this, all the hearings and stuff, preparing for trial. And when I got found, I got 15 years. And back then in the state of Texas, if you got 15 or less, even on a first-degree felony, you could post bond. My bondsman was there. He lived across the street from me. He was a fishing buddy of mine. But they gave me 15. They found me guilty on Thursday. The DA wanted $1 million bond for me to come back the next morning. And the judge said, Mr. McGowan, you're going to be back at 9 o'clock yesterday. He said, we'll go and try to get some rest, which, that was impossible.
Oh, yeah.
So I go back on the punishment phase, and I get 15 years. So we're all glad, because I knew I never stood foot in jail. But the judge called me up, and he said, he goes, hey, you need to call my lawyers and me up there. And he said, hey, you need to get you a real lawyer and get this taken off you, appellate. So we knew exactly. And I don't know why I asked the judge. I said, can you recommend somebody? He goes, ethically I can't, but your lawyer's not who to talk to. So we now called Max Seacrest. And he kept my appellate. I was on appeal for 9 and almost 10 years. I'm on appellate bond. Won the case got overturned 4 times, 4 different appeals. But things just got crazier then, man. After I got this stalking my wife, this prosecutor, she was running a restaurant. He'd go in the restaurant. I had to call the sheriff to get him out. We'd be at dinner with the kids, and he'd be in the parking lot, waving at us through his truck. He broke in the house one time when I was out of town, when he was stalking my wife, and wait till the kids were gone. Went in there, forced away in the house with her. And this is what got him. He told her that stuff we would never know. But he told her that I was a crazy murdering maniac. I was going to murder her. He kept trying to turn her against me, which of course she wasn't. But he slipped up. He said that he'd had a daughter who was 17 years old, and she had recently, this right before Christmas, that she had passed away, and that his live-in wife or whatever had moved out. We would never know that, And he told her all kind of crazy stuff. He said that he could arrange for me to be in jail so he could come spend Christmas with my wife and kids. Fucking nut. Oh. And then this happened during around the Branch Davidian shootout at Waco with ATF and all that happened. Yeah, they went out and trespassed on my dad's ranch and made a video. We didn't know they're there, no permission, nothing. But they called my attorney, so it was funny. They were saying they couldn't wait for the shootout at the McGowen compound. They were looking for a gunfight, man. And then the judge called us in one day and said, look, he goes, I'm concerned about you and your wife. I really have concerns with your children. Because, man, my kids are in private school. They're going there trying to talk to the kids, take pictures or whatever. So he said, y'all have family somewhere, and I go to Montana. So anyway, my wife and I go to Montana. And we go up there, man. And my wife calls her sister at home. They had an illegal trapping trace on the phone. Ed Porter, the prosecutor, he called the sheriff up there. So I'd kidnap my wife to bring her to the mountains and murder and bury her. We'd been gone like 10 days and drove 2,500 miles. Yeah, the sheriff came, kicked down the door, trying to, in a rescue. I think she finally got the point across to him because I was gone. I went to get a hamburger or something for us to eat when this happened. I get to the hotel and there's 4 marked SO units pulling out. Whatever, man. I saw the door kicked in. She's wet, just a towel around her. They came in at gunpoint to rescue her. I think she got the point across to them. They've been had. Call my lawyer then. He's going to get your ass back down here again. But this stuff went on constantly. Finally, the judge ordered them to stay away from us. Every time we'd get our phone numbers changed, he would subpoena and start calling us again. But the whole kicker in this, because I know we're probably getting close to time, the big kicker in this was John Denholm and Steve Clappert and Ed Porter. Denholm was a big, slovenly, also from Ohio, Rogero. I wonder what is it with people in Ohio, man? But he,
fun fact.
Loudmouth. Yeah, big loudmouth. Yeah. Driving the cars.
You brought up Ohio. there are an awful lot of like big dog true crime podcasts that come from Ohio. It seems like there's more from Ohio than literally anywhere else. And
Yeah, I just did one yesterday.
from
Don't
Ohio,
worry. Yes, I'm up in northern Ohio. Oh, geez. So, well, I don't know.
which one?
I don't know how this is going to go.
Which podcast was it?
Oh, man. It wasn't Dirty Verdict. It was Wickedly Judged. Wickedly Judged. Yeah. But anyway, she definitely don't point in that Ohio. Oh, yeah, about Denham. When I first went to work for the sheriff's department, they needed instructors. So I got a job there as an instructor, as did Ackerman, the other guy set up, and a group of other guys, because we've been at other agencies. We know, from other police agencies. So I hired us in as instructors. Well, I immediately have a run-in with this sergeant. Big, loud mouth. He would eat like a slob. He'd licking his fingers. He was just disgusting. Big, heavy-set guy. And my thing with him, though, he's a loudmouth bully. And he was always bullying the rookies, and telling them crazy stuff. And so, of course, in Ackerman, he was a muscled-up, former Montgomery County sheriff's deputy. And so we'd always buck up to this dude, man. You ain't shut your fucking mouth, man. What do you, constantly bucked up to him. Well, then he started pulling an issue with us. And he was involved in this very well-known corrupt clique run by a different major than my guy at the sheriff's department. It was completely, man, that's something they could make a movie just about that sheriff's department back then, the corruption. Stuff I saw would not fly at the city. But anyway, so this sergeant, I catch him, John Denholm, up in Ohio. Did I mention he's in Ohio? Yeah, he went back to Ohio, where he came from when I got out. But anyway, I catch him tampering with our payroll, Ackerman's payroll. He was the admin sergeant. He wasn't even our supervisor. I should have arrested him. That's a felony, right?
Yeah.
So we make an issue with that. I said, let me tell you, man, you ever mess with me again, I'm going to where I need to go. I know people, And then as soon as I get in this shooting, this major that he worked for, this corrupt major, promotes this idiot to lieutenant in homicide and puts him in charge of my shooting. So you see where this is going, right?
Perfect timing.
Yeah. And so Ackerman, about a number of months later, they arrest him on a sexual assault and a kidnapping. Well, the girl that supposedly happened to picked her up in a bar type deal. She was sad, man. I went voluntarily. We stopped at the Shell station. I went and bought some cigarettes and Cokes after we left the club. Bam, he gets jammed up 17 years in prison. But we'll get to the Rangers, what they had to say about all that. But anyway, back on the story, it was this Denholm, man. He totally set me up, And he's been nationally disgraced for doing some stuff. I always tell people there's a lawyer in Houston named Murray Newman, MurayneWman. Go to his website, click on his blog, and punch in Steve Clappert, the DA investigator, Denholm's butt bunny, Clappart, and see what I'm dealing with. Denholm and Clappert, man, people that were buffoons, they're corrupt. If you weren't down in their little corrupt, clique thing, you're going down to. And they filed capital murder on two separate situations on teenagers. In Texas, they will execute you. They will put you in death row, and they will kill you in Texas. These two individuals had nothing to do with these capital murders, but they set these guys up and tried to get a warrant on them, and they couldn't. They tried to get these two guys on death row. It had nothing to do with these two capital murders, just to make names for themselves. Wow. But they buddied up, man, and the stuff those guys did, but it's all coming out. It's all coming out. And to jump ahead, my next trial to go to, I had a very wealthy uncle. He called me in one day after all my appeals we'd won. The DAs all said, we're not going to charge him. See, because they knew it did nothing wrong. They couldn't find any witnesses. Nobody ever saw us together, nothing. That suspect. So they just did character assassination. So I knew a lot of policemen, a lot. And I had a lot of girlfriends. When I was married, which is stupid, but it was the culture. I'm not blaming the culture, but it was. And then I was divorced all this time. But, all of them said, we have nothing bad to say, And it was just craziness, man, craziness. But I told you, Scott Genovese, one of my buddies, who's an instructor with me, he wound up killing himself over this, man. They tried to indict him on a murder and threaten him to indict him on a murder. The same DAs. If you don't testify against McGowen, we're taking you down on this, man. And, then he wound up, one thing led to another. He gets transferred, because nobody back him up on the streets because he testified against me. And he wound up, after a second trial, killing himself, going on and chased a bunch of pain pills with a bottle of whiskey. And at first, it went out that he'd been murdered. Of course, I was suspect number one, dude. Oh, hell no. Yeah, my lawyers are calling me, say, "Man, you better get your ass in office now." But anyway, it was a suicide. But
Did you?
it was. Yeah, I'm
Did
sorry. Go ahead.
when you were in prison? Did you run into any, like hassle with people that you might have put in there?
I get asked that all the time. Yes, when I first went in, because I was, yeah, people my brother put in jail and sent to prison, whatever. But hey, I know you got to go. Let me do this. Let me jump through the trial, then crazy stuff in prison. I don't know how much time you guys have or
Okay.
whatever. But yeah. So anyway, my uncle said, "Hey,
I'm enjoying.
Yeah,
I mean, this is the easiest interview I've ever done. I'm enjoying listening to this.
I'm here until I fall asleep, so I'm
yeah, well,
good,
this
and
man,
I'm not going to. This is interesting as hell.
Well, let me tell you about with Clapper, the DA investigator guy, whose buddies was Denholm. At my first trial, I told you about when they went the next day, the CSU sergeant, he knew what he was doing in the day shift. They drained the waterbed, moved it. They cut out that 2 foot by 2 foot section of drywall, right? In my first trial, they put Clapper on the stand. Well, right before they put Clapper on the stand, they put that idiot Deputy Reinhardt there, talking about the bullet. And they also didn't informed Clapper when he testified about that big sheetrock that was cut out. It was sitting right there on the prosecutor's desk in front of Clapper when they called him in. Total aggravated perjury. But anyway, he's saying, and the prosecutors asked him, well, y'all went back there 5 days later, took measurements. Yeah. He said, well, how did you determine the angle of the rounds? And he said, well, I took a string, we stretched it out and this and that. And then he said, well, how did you, when the round through the face struck the headboard in the wall, how did you figure out the angle? And he said, well, I took my pin and stuck it through there. Well, yeah, you stick your pin through a hole, and the hole behind it's 2 foot by 2 foot. You can pretty much manipulate the angle, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And so we're all looking at him going, what the hell? Well, my lawyer gets up to him, right? I think it was Brian Binkin, my lawyer. And Brian gets up there and he said, well, let me ask you something, man. He said, when you went in there and doing your string theory and whatnot, what you see on this video, which is crazy, on one of these documentaries, he said, so you just took your pin out of your pocket and stuck it through the headboard? It reminds you that people have been living in the house at 5 days, and the bed had been at least drained and moved to heavy water twice in between this, right? And he said, yeah. He said, I took my pencil and stuck it through the hole in the headboard, through the hole, through the wall. Did you just use your pencil or pen in your pocket? He goes, well, actually, I had a wooden dowel. Oh, you carry a wooden dowel with you? He goes, well, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And then he goes, my lawyer's like, we're all looking at each other like, this guy's lying his ass off, right? And then he said, he goes, well, was that room under construction? He goes, no. And he goes, there's like, the whole wall was there? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, then you could see behind there the bullet hole where it lined up. And he goes, yeah. And he said, well, how big was the bullet hole? He said, oh, the size of a large caliber handgun. Yeah, 2 foot by 2 foot, totally lying his ass off.
Hit it with
and there's
buckshot
a bunch,
and just like
there's a bunch of other stuff. They got, they were chained. There were 3 different reports, and it was just, read the book. All right, read the book.
Definitely.
It reminds you, the book, I think the original book was 1,400 pages, and we recorded and knocked it down to like 400.
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
Right now, it looks like it's the published version I've got pulled up on Amazon that I actually just added to my Kindle Unlimited is 548 pages. So it's a sizable read.
Actually, I found out today there was a pre-publication was released that like didn't have some of the stuff. There was like just minor technical errors. And like the FBI agent, Michael Tabman, great job, man. He wrote a forward and somehow didn't wind up in there. So, but I think now the hard copy's coming out now. I know it's at Barnes and Noble, Bronx Kill, which is Jerry's own publishing company. And Jerry told me, I'm still working on this technology stuff, man. I was gone for 20 years. Lots changed, but it was there's like 12 other places you can get ebooks or whatever. Yeah. So I'm just Google it or whatnot.
As someone who knows people that have published books and put them on Amazon, don't buy them from Amazon. You guys don't make any money that way.
Right.
Just buy them directly from, if you can,
Jerry.
from the author or the publisher or a bookstore. It helps out a lot more than,
Yeah, Jerry said that the book is apparently doing well. I don't know. I'll talk a lot to people. But he said it should probably be in the bookstores, Barnes and Noble and Books, whatever. It's a matter of weeks. Probably be in the book. I don't know. That's his thing. I didn't write the book. I'm simply the subject matter, and I interviewed for literally probably 2,000 hours. Yeah.
Right.
But they, Yeah, but that's basically what went on. So, of course, they didn't put Clapper at the federal trial because he committed aggravated perjury. Of course, nothing was done to him or to second. Or went to a federal trial. It got overturned immediately. It was a joke, man. It was ridiculous what went on in there. But yeah, then when all my appeals were over, I told him I had a wealthy uncle, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to cut the check, man. This is destroying the entire family. You go talk to the top 5 lawyers. Excuse me, narrow it down to 3, and then we'll go make a decision." So my appellate lawyer, I think he wanted like $1 million up front, non-refundable. The guy got me out, had kept me out for almost 10 years, which we should have done that. Financially, it'd have been better. I'd never gone to prison because he had, what Brady violations are. It's when the prosecution cheats, man. They withhold exculpatory any exculpatory information, witnesses, whatever. They have to turn. They do now. The law's changed. Back then, they didn't give a shit. It was up to the prosecutors to determine. If you had a witness that said, okay, Kent McGowen, he was, say I get charged with burglary in Houston, and I have a witness that I was in Atlanta, well, it's up to DAs. They can hide that witness. And it's up to the DAs to decide whether that witness, I'm sorry about that, being hyperbolic, of course, whether that witness is pertinent or not, or is material. Well, they're going to say, what's not material? It's up to them. But anyway, I go talk to the top lawyers, and we narrowed it down to Dan Cogdell. Second biggest mistake of my entire life. He lied from the word go. We found out he didn't practice law for a year before this, that he'd knocked up some dancer and anyway, paid her off to keep the kid and whatever. This is his first big case. And several of my lawyers were Branch Davidian attorneys. They were actually the ones who went into the law firm. Yeah. Dan Cogdell, Dick DeGuerin, Jack Zimmerman. He was a full-board colonel Marine Corps. He was my appellate lawyer after my second trial. His daughter's a full-board colonel, brilliant lawyers, but they were just, man. But anyway, I hired Cogdell in, I believe, February, March of 2000. I get my years, I don't scrum, but 2001, right? So I had him for 11 months. And when I first met him, he said that every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday is going to be McGowen time. We'll come in and meet from 3 to 5 it was. Never once did it. He was friends with Lyle Lovett. Johnny Carrabba's owns Carrabba's restaurants. All they do is go, have cocktails and smoke cigars. Never discuss my case, man. And then I'll never forget this, man. Dan had a co-counsel, another lawyer worked for him. He was a really good guy. We go down there, and Dan he has his cocktails and whatever at Johnny Carrabba's restaurant with Lyle Lovett and whatnot. We're coming back to his office in this building he said was his, which it wasn't. He was getting kicked out of there because he couldn't pay the bills or whatever. But we go in we call them Jack Shacks down there, little, Oriental massage parlors and whatnot. We pull it into this parking lot, this ratty-ass trailer, right? So what are you doing, man? He goes, everybody can get a hand job. I think he's kidding. I said, what? He goes, yeah. I said, are you serious? He goes, yeah, we do this every day after lunch. Yeah, relax, gets to work better, I'm like, this is what you're doing, my family's money? And they figured out that I wasn't up for that, not because of the situation, because what, But they did nothing. And after 11 months of hiring that guy, it was 11, he did nothing. He talked to no witnesses. And the one witness I'll tell you about in a second. He talked to my confidential informant, Michael Schaefer, for less than an hour on the Sunday night prior to my trial starting Monday morning. He never talked to Morong and Malloy, the guys there. He never read a document, nothing.
Damn. That's the ultimate, days. Like, I've got a project ready. I've got a project due tomorrow, and I have to rush it. Holy shit.
I can't really say their names, but there was my case and 3 other very high-profile politician, billionaire son. I don't remember who the other guy was. Oh, some rapper, famous rapper, South Park Mexican. But we all talked about these 4 defendants. And the 4 of us had given Dan Cogdell $11 million in 11 months in legal fees. All of us went to prison. I got the least time. One guy got 75, another guy got 45. He was a child molesting rapper guy down here. He got jammed up when he's in prison. Other pregnant 14-year-old showed up on it. Not 11 days prior to my trial, my kids were at school, and I was sitting there in the kitchen talking to my wife, eating lunch, whatever. And I said, man, this ain't going good. He's doing nothing. And a phone rings, and it was Jeff Becker, Cogdell's investigator. I pick up the phone, and he goes, hey, man. He said, I need to talk to you. I could tell by his tone something was up. And I said, yeah. He goes, hey, meet me at Cadillac Bar. It was like this fancy hamburger beer place for all the lawyers and whatever ate.
I've heard of that place.
Yeah, and he said, I'll be there about an hour, right? And so I'll go down there, and we drank a few Lone Star beers, had a cheeseburger, maybe knocked out a Marlboro or two. Man, Jeff looks at me, he goes, and when I got that phone with him, I told him, I said, I'm fucked, I'm going to prison, man. And then after Jeff looks at me, I said, what's going on, man? He looks at me and said the exact words. He goes, you're fucked, you're going to prison, man. I just told my wife that. What in the hell's Cogdell doing? He goes, nothing, man. He said he owed that investigator $136,000 in investigative fees. He says he's not paying what he owes me. That's not his office. The secretary's about to quit. They're about to cut off the phones. I'm like, what did he do with all those millions of dollars? He said, I'll tell you what he did. He said he snorted up his nose and blew it on hookers. And I'm like, that's a lot of dope on hookers. He said, you don't know him like I do. They know each other like 20 years at that point. So, of course, I burn out of the restaurant. I go to the office. We have a big confrontation in the office. And then that's why that was 11 days prior to trial. And the Sunday before trial, the investigator finally convinces him to go at least sit down with the key witness, the Michael Schaefer, the informant. Talked to him for less than an hour,
Oh,
and
he had cocaine and hookers to do.
Well, he had his priorities. He had his priorities on it. If you look that dude up, he has his own podcast. He has like hundreds of thousands of viewers.
God damn.
It's called Cogdell Uncensored. And you've never seen such a more arrogant, hubristic asshole. But he says these little podcast things, like little 2 or 3 minute blurbs. I couldn't help myself. I just stumbled on that a couple of weeks ago, and I couldn't help but make a few comments in there about, hey, you remember my family, what happened to? But anyway, so I go to trial with him, I'm literally, like I said earlier, I'm literally writing who the witnesses want to stand and questions and hand them to him. Then during a break, he calls me over and he said, hey, quit doing that. You're making me look like an asshole. I don't care, man. I'm an asshole, brother. Yeah. And then, of course, I told him not to talk to any witnesses, right? So we're out at a break or whatnot. And I walk in, there's Morong and Malloy in uniform, right? Someone over shook their hands, because I hadn't talked to these guys in 10 years, But I've seen them on, like, documentaries up there, going to bat for me, man. And so, like Todd said, he goes, I was there. He goes, I know what happened. I stood right there and watched it, man. All this is bullshit, But he went, I went up and shook their hands, and I said, hey, you guys ready? And they're like, well, we don't know. I said, what do you mean? We never talked to your lawyer. What? They said, we never talked to him. Shoved Cogdell in the hallway, man. That's what are you doing, man? And he said, well, I had their statements. Man, that was 10 years ago, And so through the trial was just ridiculous nonsense. Same line, bullshit, whatever. But not to get into all that. Read the book. As Jerry tells me to say, read the book. It's in the book. But
you would think that you would want the 2 other people that were there that night as witnesses.
At least, yeah.
Maybe I should become a lawyer. Like, I think I could do that better than half the ones that we talk about on here with stuff.
Oh, Dan has his own jet, lives in probably a $10, $15 million house. I mean, it's crazy now.
I'm in like a 300 square foot apartment, and I'm doing.
Yeah, go look at his Facebook page. See where he lives. Yeah, see where he lives, and see his diamond. He has a Rolex Presidential with a diamond bezel and a diamond face on it. And I saw it the other day. I wonder if that's my dad's.
Oh shit!
God.
But we had the trial. It was going bad, and we're having closing arguments right at the end. And you can't put any more any more testimony or evidence on. It's not already been. We literally take a break before closing arguments. And Dan goes, "Hey, I need you to go," because he had a townhouse near the courthouse downtown anyway. Also. And so Jeff Becker's in the back of Dan's truck. I'm sitting in the front. We go to Dan's house, start to get out, and we get there. And Dan goes, no, wait here. So he goes in, and Jeff's behind me. And he goes, you know what he's doing, don't you? I said, he's coking up. He said, hell yeah, man. And so Dan comes out. He literally had cocaine on his nose. This is my lawyer about to have closing arguments, right? And he comes in completely wired up. Yeah, I said, hey, you need to wipe that shit off your nose, dude, before you go in. I got it. Man, we go in there because the defendant goes first on closing arguments, and then the state trashes you afterwards, right? And then Dan's pouring sweat, screaming and hollering. Everybody's like, "What the hell is wrong with this guy, man?" He's arguing with the judge. He told me he went to law school with this judge. They argued in front of the jury, personal stuff all the time. I'm sunk, dude. I'm sunk. And then the state got up there, I don't need to scream and holler. And the prosecutor starts putting on all this stuff that had nothing to do with the trial. putting up autopsy pictures and saying I was fired from these apartments. I was never fired from any agency, and, and Dan didn't object to anything,
Oh,
So,
fuck.
yeah. So needless to say, I got found guilty, man, on a Friday, and that weekend happened to be my anniversary and my birthday, and I think Easter, So they put me in Harris County Jail where I knew everybody in there. I trained most of them. My cousin was working there. And so they bring me out Monday and they give me 20 years, right? So I hear my mom wail and my dad breaking down. And then, yeah, bad feeling, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, And then I tell you, man, never mind, I'm getting what happened. But anyway, it was terrible, And so they wanted me out of jail quickly, out of the county, because I knew people were in there. And so I go to prison a few days later. I don't know jack shit about prison, man. If people ask me, what's prison like? You know what I'm saying? Shawshank Redemption. That's got to be the most realistic movie, actually, what actually goes on. Because, if I sit here and told you guys, we could talk for an hour, I tell you goes in prison, you're going, this guy's definitely full of shit about this, man. If you've never been, I don't know, y'all might have been to prison.
I haven't.
Don't go. Don't go. It sucks, man.
Well, I've also heard that Orange is the New Black is a pretty good depiction of.
Yeah, I've never seen that one. I've never seen that one.
I watched the series, all of it, and it was, yeah. I've heard people who know say that that series is pretty accurate as well. I mean, there's embellishment, obviously, but for the most part, it's pretty spot on.
Yeah, it's insanity, man. But when I got there, I went to 20 different prisons over safety and security, and wardens didn't want me on there.
Wow.
But my first night there, it was dark, and rainy when I got there, and they put me in safekeeping, which is ridiculous. I was the only Caucasian guy in that wing. They're the only heterosexual in that wing. So back then they used to have flies in the front of the boxers. I used 2 guards with me, right? And they would always shackle me up, complete, shackles to your waist, chained to your feet, shackled for my safety. So it's kind of hard to defend myself in this situation, right? Don't even get me going on my attitude toward prison guards. That's a whole different podcast there, man. What I saw them do. But anyway,
well, I know that in your book you go over how prisoners are treated as well in Texas.
Yeah. I was I refused to work. I tell you, I'm not slaving with you, man. See, I had that ace in the hole. But I got an issue, a security issue. One thing I'll get to that in a second, but I got always tell that ace in the hole was the police. Hey, man, I know this dude. And they locked me on solitary confinement, which is a vacation, while they investigated. How they investigate them? You're prison guards. You're in training investigation. But yeah, first night in there, man, I'm going down this on the 3rd tier, right? And the prison I was there is the intake. It was built in, I think, 1857, somewhere like that. Yeah, little red brick falling down. And walked down, and all these dudes are on their knees with their butt cheeks spread. And I was only Caucasian, heterosexual, clearly. They're telling me, hey, man, this and that, whatever. I was like, what oh, hell no. They get up 4 a.m. in the shower. They throw me in the shower, these 6 dudes, right? And they're in there, taking care of themselves, you know what I mean? And I'm like the only white guy there, a policeman, and these psychos, I was planning on escaping. I get out of here. I thought I was going there for 20 years. I didn't know, And then, anyway, just real quick when I was there, diagnostic, I had this lady call me in, 40-something years old, I guess. And they have what they call sociology 1 and 2. Sociology is 1, they ask all about your family, where they live. I didn't tell them jack shit. I'm going to tell them anything. I guess that's in case you escaped and know where to look or whatever. But this other lady at Sociology 2, where they go over your case, I remember I walk in there and she had 4 big 3-ring binders spread on her, and then 2 smaller ones, across the whole desk. And I walk in, and I've been there 5 days. I hadn't slept in 5 days. I was somewhat pissed, to say the very least. And she looks, she goes, well, sit down. I said, I'm going to stand up. What is it you want? Ask me. And she goes, yeah. She said, let me tell you. She goes, I've been doing this 14 years. This is the biggest crock of shit I've ever seen. What are you doing here? And I said, man, I have no idea. No idea.
I didn't really have much say in the matter.
Yeah, it was involuntary, I assure you. She said, she starts reading on these files and exactly what happened, And she said, man, same thing I just told you, the other guy said, man, you had is going to warrant somebody judge this and this. And I said, what is that you're reading? She goes, this is your case file. I said, from who? She says, this is the DA's office. Man, my lawyers fought to get that. Nobody ever surrender it, you know. So, you know, then the prison was insane, dude. First unit they sent me to way out in West Texas. Not getting prison stories. That's all thing. This is just typical. They put me in a cell with a guy who was a crazy guy who was in there for stabbing a Lubbock police officer 17 times, right?
Oh,
He cried. He didn't know who I was, I don't think.
Oh, okay.
He cried the whole time, showed me obituaries. He clearly was a nut. Then they put me in with with another crazy, literally a psycho dude. And there was this female captain there. I wish I knew her name. She was pretty cool. She's like 40. And then they put me in with this other guy. He looked like he's straight out of the Amazon, man. I don't speak Spanish, but like I get my point across. Like you're speaking Spanish, I ain't fair what you're saying. I don't know, you know, I'm not linguist. And this guy had like this bang haircut before they were popular like now. I mean, this looked like something off a National Geographic thing in the and he was a total psycho. He flipped out one night screaming, crawling around his hands and knees on the floor because he saw a hair. One of my hairs was on the floor blowing around in the fan, he thought. So anyway, they dragged him off, and we saw him putting him in the ambulance all shot up with something. The captain calls me in, and I said, hey, look, man, do you have like a burglar, some guy within 15 years of age, an auto thief, maybe a drug dealer, you know?
Couple felony DUIs.
Yeah, something like that, man.
Just a normal dude.
Yeah, so she puts me in with a guy named Juan Flores. I was 36. I got locked up. And he was like probably 54. He's in there for DWI, third one felony. He should have been out 30 days prior to this event I'm about to tell you. And all he talks about, it is sad, man. This is another have to take a shot of water moments.
No worries.
All he talked about, man, was seeing his mom. She was 96 years old. And this guy was a very successful restaurateur, two sisters in San Antonio, two sisters that were lawyers. He's a good guy, man. And I talked about, man, my mom, I just got to get to her. You know, she's 96. I'm already supposed to be out here. And he wouldn't even pee in the cell if I was in there. I'd say, dude, we're in there for like 12 hours. That's ridiculous. But that's how polite, dignified, civilized this guy was. You know, I kept saying, this is pretty. And I'd only been in 100 days maybe, you know. And he worked like in the laundry from like midnight to 5 a.m. Of course, I refused to work. But he came in at 5 a.m. one morning, and he said, hey, Kent, man, I really have to use the bathroom. I said, man, do your thing. In prison, it's customary. You like lay on your butt, roll over, and look at the wall, you know, so poops or whatever. And then I thought that was very odd. He had really bad diarrhea. And I didn't know he was in the process of having a heart attack. That's a symptom of it coming on, right?
Oh, shit.
And so he lays on his bunk, and I got up to make a ramen noodle. I'll never in my life ever eat another ramen noodle again. That's like the staple in there. That's when you gamble with it. They try. I didn't do it. Oh, God. I can't even look at him going to the grocery store. But anyway, I was talking to him. I had my back to him. He said something bizarre. And I looked at him. I said, hey, man, you okay? I literally saw his ears change color. And he just, wham, he falls in between there's a table welded to the wall and a bunk with about a 20-inch spread maybe. He was on his knees, his hand behind his back, and his forehead on the floor. I knew he was DRT. He died, right? Some shit, man. And I didn't ever talk to anybody. You know, I didn't talk to nobody. And I could tell you some stories. If you'll do another podcast on prison, what happened to me in there, and crazy. But anyway, I drag him out because, you know, I knew CPR. So I dragged Flores out, and I start kicking the door, you know. And like between like 5 and 6 a.m., like the night shift guys come in, and everybody starts rolling out for work. Where it's like an hour of kind of a quiet time type situation. So it's kind of quiet in there, you know. And so boom, I'm giving him CPR. He never took his dentures out. I didn't know he had dentures, so he popped out my mouth when he vomited when I was giving him CPR. And so I'm hitting the emergency button, which those guards, they don't care. You know? So bam, 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 bam. I start calling this, you know, solid steel door as hard as I could. All the inmates are looking at me. Hey, that white motherfucker's going crazy in there, man. I could hear them all hollering night. I was bam, bam, give him CPR, work on him, hit the button, bam, bam, bam. And then finally the door rolls. Because all the inmates, I started hollering. I said, hey, Flores is dead in here. Because he had some older Hispanic friends, you know, he would hang out with. And so everybody starts hollering, get a guard in here, get a guard in here. And so I'm on the second floor. Yeah, it was a 2-floor. This is 20-something years ago. It was at L213, I remember it was a cell. The big steel door rolls. And there's this little an old white lady guard I've never seen before since 5'3", 80 pounds. I said, you know, see, and I had vomit all over me. He defecated and urinated at this point. And he said, and I said, you know, CPR. And she doesn't say a word. She shakes her head. I said, give me some help, you know. I already had vomit and stuff on me, right? So I said, do compressions, you know. And she never said a word, you know. And she physically wasn't big enough. So I shoved her and I said, go get some help, you know, because she couldn't do it. And mind you, this is like 100. There's no air conditioner or and heat in Texas prisons. I'm on my knees on the concrete, 110 degrees, you know, wearing nothing but boxers. But it was, and anyway, she runs out, and this is like shift change. They change shifts at 6, right? And the senior warden was a female named Wilhelmina Howard. I'll never forget that. And she was a medical doctor. Why she was a prison guard, I have no idea. But I never saw her. But anyway, all the guards, not that it mattered if they put it out was me, because every unit was leery about me. Because, you know, I had connections, and they knew that if something happened to me, there would be someone's going to look into it. I've seen a murder inmate. I'm talking about guards, murder inmates, raping inmates. We need to do a different podcast on that one. But anyway,
we could do one on prisons in general.
Might have to twist my arm about getting back on for that, right?
Oh, I can. Yeah, I can tell you something. You'll laugh through a lot of them, man. But it'll really piss off what went on. But anyway, just about the story about him, and that'll be the prison thing. But he, so I'm giving CPR, right? Well, they put it on the radio. It was me. And so all the inmates are flipping out. Inmates flip out like wild savages. They're all screaming, hollering, bang, bang. I can see the movies, banging the doors, screaming, help him, man, help him. And then I hear on the radio the guards standing around me watching. Not one guard helped. Not one. And I heard the warden get on the phone and ask that cool captain showed up, the female. And the warden said, I heard her say, is he dead yet? You know? And the warden the captain looks at me and I'm like, oh, shit. Because she knew that I wasn't one who's going to let this fly, right? So I talked to her a number of times. And then the warden on the radio says, the captain says, I don't think so. And captain said, don't let him die on my property. Make sure y'all do something to keep him until they get him out. I don't want him dying on my property. Then the inmates hear all this because their guards are all over piled in. There are 14 people in the cell. It was a 5x9, I think. 14 people. The dead guy, me, and they're all piled in there. It's at least 110 in there, you know. And I'm hollering at the guards, man, you got to help me, you know. And my knees like I was getting bashed with ball-peen hammers. This was 55 minutes into this. The medical nurses finally show up. One brings a blood pressure cuff. That's it. She puts it on. I never forget this. This chokes me up, man. This one nurse put the blood pressure, you know. Oh, and this one was cussing because that was the third guy that died in a week of a heart attack there, you know. And she said, I was telling that fucking warden to get us a fucking defibrillator. This is the third motherfucker in a week we died like this. I never forget that other nurse, man. She was right next to me. The other nurse starts praying for this guy, you know. And she was saying, you know, dear Lord, there's any reason to let this man live. Let him live, you know. And I was pissed, man. I was telling these guards, you're going to have to help. And I was like blacking out, man. You know, it's a physical thing to do, especially when your knees in concrete. Yeah. And his heat while he's assholes, you know, on top of me. And then finally the captain says, where's the ambulance? Everybody look, nobody called 911. Right. So this is 45 minutes into it. It took 10 minutes to get the ambulance there we're way the hell out in nowhere. What a little town was. Anyway. But not one guard opens the door. It was a doctor and 2 paramedics. Not one guard opens the door, help them bring the striker, the gurney upstairs, nothing. They bring that in there, man. They slam that dude on there. Man, they're wham, hitting him in the chest with, I guess, what are they giving the chest when you're dying?
Maybe like epinephrine or something like that.
Adrenaline, yeah. Man, that doctor's just pounding him, you know. And this time he defecated, he urinated, he vomited. Now there's blood squirting out there. I mean, they're jamming IVs and whatever. They get him on, not one guard helps him get him to the ambulance, right? And so everybody freaking out, right? They got all the inmates locked up. Well, all the guards start leaving, and I'm standing in the corner, man. I got vomit, feces, blood, sweat all over me. My hair's almost. I was livid. And the captain looks at me and she goes, McGowen, you okay? I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you fucking people? You let this man die in my arms. What the hell is wrong with you people, man? And so anyway, she said, well, you know, you need to get dressed and take we need to get a statement on it. So I said, I'm brushing my teeth and showering first. I grabbed my gear, went down, forgot my boots. I come back up, and there's an old guy. I got sent back to that unit 10 years later. Old crazy asshole white guy named, they call him Sidewinder. He had something wrong with his hip. But he's loading all my gear and the dead guy's gear in these big onion bags, the chain bags I call them.
Yeah.
I said, what the hell are you doing, man? I'm here. I just got to prison on a murder charge, right? And I'm in there with a dead guy. I'm the only one in there. I mean, he could have got hit in the head with a pipe at work. I don't know. But I'm there with a dead guy. So technically, I was a suspect of homicide. It was otherwise cleared. Clearly, it was a heart attack. But that just blew up to an issue. But they tried to pull on me there, and I wouldn't talk. That's all crazy. We need to do a prison podcast, man. I'm telling you.
Absolutely.
I can tell you shit. And like Jerry says, I got the receipts, man. I filed federal lawsuits, criminal charges. They tried to have me murdered. They sent a Mexican mafia guy to assassinate me.
Oh,
actually,
shit.
even the gang sergeant. When that happened, we'll get into that later, but it's another podcast. But when the gang sergeant called me in, he goes, "How did you know this guy was here to assassinate you?" Because they sent him from another unit where I was, right? What are the odds of that? There's 165,000 inmates in Texas. And I saw this Mexican mafia guy. I knew I could take him. I saw him get beat up all the time. He had a big mouth. They put him in the cell with me. Anyway, he tries to murder me. It didn't work out on his side. They call me down about it. And then the gang sergeant goes, "How do you know he's in a gang?" I said, this is the Boyd unit. And I said, I was at Stevenson unit with him, South Texas, man. He's a Mexican mafia, you know. He goes, "What else makes you think, this?" And I said, "Well, you're the gang sergeant, right?" So, I'm not an idiot. You're the gang sergeant. He told me, he said, "Man, they sent that fucking dude to kill you, man." I said, "I know it." That wasn't the first time. That wasn't the first time. But anyway, if y'all, I know it's late. If y'all have any questions or whatever, and absolutely, man, if y'all want to do another podcast, what went on in prison and how I actually got out of prison, because that's interesting, because that involves the Texas Rangers, some high-ranking political officials that got involved. Ray Hunt, executive director of the police union, best human I've ever met in my life. What he's
we
done.
We could do a part 2.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I mean, like, I don't mind that it's 2 hours. I mean, there's not really going to be very much to edit out.
I was going to say this is going to be a cakewalk for you, Billy. You don't have to edit me saying stupid shit out, because I think this is the least I've ever said on your show, because I'm just like locked in on this.
Well, I'll tell you this, man. I've only told you about maybe 5%, but I don't use this word, but from an entertainment value, we got to do one about the prison stuff, man.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was
absolutely
crazy shit. Like I said, it's all documented. I have thousands of pages of documents. Some of it's kind of funny, because it was, I'm in there with idiots, I mean, the average person, like you asked, we'll talk about that. I ran into people, a pretty funny story. A guy I bought 3 kilos of cocaine from. I run into him when I was in prison like 6 months. Hey, I remember you, dude. I'll tell you that real quick. Just a second, give me 1 minute.
Okay.
He has this tall, slender Hispanic guy, right? He was older or younger, I guess. But I was like in the hallway for I see him for like a couple of weeks. "Hey, man, how's it going?" I said, "Well, that's a nice guy. Hey, what's up, dude?" I don't remember who he was. So a few weeks later, I'm in the chow hall, and I never let anybody touch me in there. This guy taps me on the shoulder. I say, "Hey, man, don't touch me, dude." He goes, "Hey, man," he goes, you remember me?" I said, "No." He goes, "Yeah, you chased me across the Gulf Freeway, which is I-45 south from Houston to Galveston." I said, "Man, I bought 3 kilos of cocaine you had been against one time, right?" He goes, "Yeah, man." I never said anything about it. That dude was gone the next day. If somebody said something, they got him off that unit. Yeah. But yeah, I ran into some guys my brother locked up, some guys I was locked. It's funny because I didn't go to prison for 10 years, right? So there'd be a dude in there who's 21, and he'd say, "Hey, man, that McGowen." Everybody called me HPD for whatever. That's just the whole time, HPD. And there was rumors that I was an FBI agent undercover in there watching the guards. Oh. That whole story's insane. But they'll say, "Hey, HPD," but these young guys would try to associate themselves with me, Hey, guy would come on and go, "Hey, man, that dude over there, David Appleby or whatever. Yeah, he told me you arrested you. That's pretty cool, man." I said, "Dude, you're like 7 when this happened. What do you mean arrested?" Arrested you. But it was weird because they would try to associate them, because that's just, prisoners are idiots, man. They are, But I ran into a lot of police officers in there, man. Innocent guys. I'd always watch because I went to 20 units. And within those units, I'd get moved from building to building, wing to wing, pod to pod, And I was, but they would, but I'd always watch. I'd sit there for like 3 or 4 or 5 days. I'd watch who was in the wing or whatever. and I could tell a veteran or a law enforcement officer just by the way they walk,
Yeah.
And then I'd go up, and I'd have guys come up to me, hey man, if I was, if I told you I was in green class, I knew they were HPD, they're trying to fill each other out. I'd sit there and watch new guys coming in. I said, that dude's a policeman, man, but that was crazy. But like I said, there's a lot more to this. Oh, buy the book, yeah.
Definitely. We're gonna link it.
But I'll tell you this.
I'll tell you this. For the book?
What's that?
After talking to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You get nothing from the book?
No, I had interviewed.
Oh damn!
But I tell you this. Let me pitch this because I need help with this. Is they after speaking literally the top 100 lawyers at least in the state of Texas, they're all scared to death of Cogdell, my previous attorney. I told you he was the attorney general's, and now his law partner's now the district attorney at the the DA's office. Yeah, I wonder how that happened. What are the odds of that, right?
Yeah, right.
But I can't say who it is right now, but I have probably the best lawyer in the country, and he's taking my case. And this individual is not cheap. And as you probably imagine, this thing has devastated my entire family, socially, professionally, financially, and otherwise.
Well, you got to go fund me?
I have a Give, Send, Go. Yeah.
Okay.
I put it up like 3 years ago, like 4 people, because I didn't know how to advertise it. But just a Give, Send, Go, just punch in Kent McGowen. And I think if you look at sections, it's under first responders. But it's going to take a lot of money for this lawyer. This is the only lawyer that in the state of the country is not afraid of Cogdell. This is an individual who despises Cogdell. There's a very negative history with this individual. And probably the next couple of weeks, we'll go public with it. But just the situation right now is kind of tenuous, if you will.
Right.
I mean, this individual's taking the case, but there are just some political maneuvers that need to be made before we go public.
Now, I have a question before we wrap up. I mean, yeah, I'll find that and I'll link it. Just message me the name of what what platform it's on, and then I'll find it. But okay, you've done, you did your entire sentence. It's over with. You're out.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when people, I mean, before I say this, I just want to say that, I believe every word he says. I mean,
absolutely.
This is, I mean, you're sitting there, you don't have notes. You're telling this off the top of your head, and what the author said on the podcast that I listened to is just like in over the entire course this has been going on, your story has never changed, and that was what that's something that is kind of rare, and when especially when a lot of time has passed, and then when people go out, they're just kind of like, oh, all right, whatever, or they're meanwhile you're, oh, okay, there it is.
I already sent you a link too. My ADHD kicked in.
Oh yeah. Hey, don't disregard those AI figures. That guy was helping me. Every time he redid it, I looked 10 years older, man.
Oh damn! Holy crap!
It's a fantastic mustache, though.
No, he's talking about the current.
Well, yeah, both of them. Yeah, the one with the mustache, he is a dashing lad, no doubt, but that's not me.
The other one's not doing you any justice at all. I'm not going to lie. I mean,
but see, I don't know how to adjust that. That was a recent me. That's me when I got out. School go back one. Yeah, that's when I first got out. Yeah.
Now, how long did you spend total inside?
I had a 20-year sentence. I did 19 years, 4 months, and 4 days.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Let me just tell this.
Hold on. Let me finish. Let me finish where I was going.
Yeah,
I was just wondering, if you've hired this super expensive attorney,
mm-hmm.
and you're done with it. Why? My question, and I mean, I mean this with the utmost respect, but why bother? It's over. It's pretty much over with.
Yeah. That's what I always bring up. Is but my mom, in a short period of time, I lost to death before I got out. my favorite aunt, then my mom, then my favorite uncle married an aunt, then my dad, then my son, then my sister-in-law had a divorce when I was 9 years old. And I promised my mom, I knew when one passed is not uncommon. One would die right after. They've been together for like 60 years, something like that. And then I promised both of them on their deathbeds, that they said, promise me you'll fight this, you clear your name and the family's name,
Okay.
But my 4 reasons I always tell people, I said, because my family's there's much due justice for my family needs to be had,
Right.
And my second reason is what I told about my mom and dad, promise them their deathbeds. And the third reason is because my children grew up with this, man. You imagine what they put up when, one of my youngster when he was born, being in 3rd grade and this being their dad, they've dealt with now have grandchildren, a 9-year-old grandson, they deal with this, this, it needs to be cleared for them. My 4th reason and final reason is those freaking scumbags that did this, they've done this to a lot of people. And some police officers I know they've set up. They targeted us. They need to be held accountable, man. They've done this for 50 years. They need to be held accountable civilly and criminally. And that's what's going to happen. And with this lawyer, what we're doing, because we discussed today, nobody ever filed an actual innocence written on me. Everybody just kept on actual innocence. Lawyers they're always trying to fight, screw over, point finger. Nobody ever just said he didn't do this, man, in the appeals. And then doing that and pursuing a full pardon with the governor.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I figured, I wasn't like putting you on the spot or anything. I was just curious. I just wanted, the reasoning from your mouth on the show. And you know what? I get it. That's all. But that is an interesting question because of how it's just, it just seems like it's an awful lot. And to be honest with you, that lends even more credibility to your story about the fact that you're willing to go through all this.
Yeah, Ray Hunt, who we'll address next time, the executive director of the police union, who pretty much got me out. I think it was in Jerry's book, but he said, that I've never changed my story.
Right.
He said the thing is, he said people like Ken who've been to prison, most people get out. Yeah, I did it. So what? You can't touch me. There's nothing to do. But he said the innocent people that Ray Hunt did, the innocent people that have been wrongly convicted and gone to prison, they've been so deeply wronged, you just can't get over it, man. I'll never get over this. I remember many years ago, my mom asked me, like 15 years ago, she said, when you get out, you're going to get over this? No, you can't get over this, man.
Yeah. Well,
they stole 20 years of your life.
Yeah. And I tell you, in my family, I could deal with all that, man. But, seeing my kids, my grandkids, my parents, siblings, what they all went through.
I know all about not being able to let something go.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'll tell you, man. When after we'll talk about that later. But I saw parole 10 times before I got out. I was eligible for 15 years. I could have got out, but when the parole commissioner, Texas, in like other states, you go before like 5 or a board, and I didn't do it or I did. I'm sorry. Wow. That's not like that, man. It takes years. Even while you see them. You don't even see the people that vote for you unless you have an extraordinary case, a lot of political sway or whatever, a lot of controversy, high profile. I saw them 3 times in the 10. The last one, the lady let me out, man. And they called me down because of COVID. She couldn't come in, As I went to sit in the computer, Major comes and gets me and sits me in his office. He said, hey, he's a cool dude. Is it a private unit? At the end, a senator had me put there to keep me from getting whacked before my last few years. But I sit in his office in front of a computer, and this lady pops up, Yeah, just her name right at the top of my head. I'll never forget that lady. But she said, she pops up on the computer, and I never talked on the computer, And she goes, I look at her and say, hey, can you hear? She goes, can you hear me? Because I had a goofy look, I'm sure. And I said, yes, ma'am. Can you hear me? And she goes, yeah. And I said, well, I don't sound like a techno imbecile. I've never talked on the computer before, And she laughed. She goes, I guess you haven't. And then she called me Kent. My name is Joseph Kenton. I've always been my middle name Kent. And she goes, well, Ken, I'm here to tell you something. When she said Ken, so I was ready to give her my spill, man. Because this is the 3rd time they actually talked to me, the voters. And she said, I know how you went on prison, And she said, what was her name? I wanted to tell you her name. It'll come across. But Tracy Long was her name. Yeah. And she said, She kind of reminded me of my mom, to be honest with you. But she said, I know what's happened to you in prison, man. And she goes, I know how you got here. And she goes, I'm going to give you an FI1, which means immediate release. I'm going to get you out here immediately. And I didn't know what to say. I was about to cry. I didn't want to hug her. If she'd been, I would have hugged her through the computer, But I just kind of looked at her. I just, thank you. Because I've already laid it out to her, man. I didn't do this, man. And I only had less than a year left. And then she said, I'm going to get you out here immediately. And she goes, do you know why it's taken 10 times? And I told her, so because she gave me a year earlier, 1 year set off, which means they put you off a year. They do it from anywhere from 1 year to like 10. I said, you gave me a set off last time. I know it takes 2 of y'all to do it. And she goes, look, some people have talked to me since then. And as far as the second vote, which this guy's retired sheriff of Lubbock County here, she goes, I've got to take care of it. We're going to get you out of here immediately. It still took 86 days to get out. And she told me, she said, I know what's happened to you in prison, how you got here. And she goes, do you know why you've been denied parole for 15 years? I said, I have my suspicions. And she said, do the names Steve Clapper and John Denholm ring a bell? I said, the other guys who set me up. She said, they've been calling it, because I knew it, because we'll get into that later in another interview, but I saw my profile. It was felony for this guy to show it to me, but just to cover his ass. Nobody ever protested my parole, ever. Nobody, officially. But she said, let me tell you about it. She goes, Denham and Clapper have been calling her for 15 years, saying that you had contracts to have them killed, you're going to murder them, which would be understandable, but I wouldn't do it, of course.
Right.
But she said, that's why you've been denied this whole time. Nobody's protested. The family, nobody's protested that. You sat here all this time because of those two guys. And she knew the story, obviously. It still took 86. When I got on parole, well, we'll talk about that later. But anyway, parole told me the same thing. But if y'all want to do another podcast or whatever, that's fine. We can start out.
I'm 1,000% in for that.
Yeah, we can start out when I got to prison and then how I got out and what's happened afterward, which is even more bizarre,
Yeah, because I know those.
I'm like the reverse. I'm like the reverse of Forrest Gump. Crazy things happen to me, but not in my favor. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
But all right. Well, that was riveting.
Yeah.
Easiest interview I've ever done.
Yeah, this went smoothly. I'm gonna say what happened, man. I'll never forget. And that's a curse, not a blessing. I have eidetic memory. I remember everything and never forget. It's terrible in this situation.
Oh, yeah. I've got one of those memories too. It's just like, a conversation that happened 25 years ago. And somebody would be like, "Okay, well, blah 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 blah." I'm like, "No, that's not how it happened. This is how it happened, and this is what you said, down to word for word." Yeah, that's me.
I've got that memory where I lay down at 9 o'clock at night to go to bed. And I'm like, you remember that one really stupid thing you did in 10th grade? You're going to think about that now and not sleep. Yeah.
Well, I try to just focus on the positive, but man, just hopefully, this book comes out, the story comes out, this lawyer will get me pardoned or, whatever. Actually, the DA's office here is trying to do something in my favor. Oddly enough, the day the book came out, they called me. Hey, we're going to try and do something to help you. Yeah, great. What are the odds of that? What a coincidence that was, huh? They're all dirty. Well, this is cool. I appreciate it, guys. I know it's odd. I had a good time, but I think this went well, and I got the high points out. But just let me know if y'all do a follow-up. I appreciate the mention on the Give Send Go. I absolutely do not have the money in this.
We'll link that. We'll link it. The show is probably, the show's in a growing phase right now, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, hopefully we get some help headed your way.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll put it because I have a lot of people follows. Not like y'all or whatever, But so I'll post. If y'all get it to me, I'll post it. Whatever. I know the other one that Alan Warren, that writer, introduced me to Jerry. He's got 10,000 views in the last few days. I got interviewed with him. Yeah.
Awesome.
So I know well.
Well,
this will
be probably
careful, man. Yeah.
This will probably be. I have another episode that's ready to release in the next day or two. This one will be the next one, next weekend.
Sure. So. And if people start commenting or whatever, say, "Hey, wait a minute, what happened? What happened then? What happened? What happened in prison? How do you get out? What's he doing now?"
Yeah.
Yes, let me know. I can always make time for you guys, man. You have no idea how much. You have no idea how much this means. Y'all at least letting my family to get the story out there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, all about it. So,
Yeah. All right, cool.
well, thanks, Kent, for coming on. It's been,
Thank you.
Like
Thank
I said,
you all.
it's been riveting. We, you were definitely going to do a round 2 at some point before too long, and
Okay.
Yeah, tell everybody, get that book. We're gonna link the book. We're gonna link the crowdfunding page. We're gonna do that, and if anybody has any questions or whatever, do you have a way for people to interact with you?
Yeah, just through my email. Just my name's Kent, Kent. My last name McGowen at Gmail. I answer all
Okay.
emails. Answer all emails.
Okay.
Anybody has questions? Anybody has any information that can help us? Any witnesses step up or whatever? Absolutely appreciate anything. We need all that.
Yeah.
We have a pretty good deal. We need all the help we can muster on this to get me out of this mess.
All right.
And to get some justice for once, like that would be
for us. And again,
fantastic.
when y'all go to that lawyer Murray Newman and look at his blog, yeah, I pasted something on my Facebook page, a screenshot, a couple of things on that blog just on my Facebook page. That's what people say about this. Makes us wonder how many other innocent. Not even talking about me, talking about another case with Clapper and Denholm. What their conspiracies? What the guy who investigated, retired HPD homicide guy, and he wrote that, and he said it makes me wonder. It says it makes one wonder how many innocent people are actually still in prison because of Clapper and Denholm. I was one.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you thanks for listening. Like, follow, share, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. Also do all of that for History Goon as well.
Yeah.
And, if you like us, tell a friend. If you hate us, tell an enemy. And until next time, later.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you.